This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
Be careful what you wish for, eh? 3 minutes after 10 is the time, reflecting occasionally in recent weeks, particularly in August, because that's generally what happens in August, on the paucity of news, upon the shortage of subject matter for us to get our teeth into together. And while I often remind you that just because a story is enormous doesn't necessarily mean that it is going to work for us, for our sort of joint contemplations every morning, there is a sense this morning of there being almost too much news to keep up with. The events in Poland, extraordinary by any measure. We shall hopefully get a little bit of insight into that later in the programme. And then, of course, the decision by Benjamin Netanyahu to attack an American ally. Is that the correct phraseology? Or to attack people who are in a country that is an American ally? I don't know. You know that Qatar now has the dubious honour of having been attacked by both Israel and Iran. The last time we were talking about Benjamin Netanyahu's sort of unilateral decisions to launch attacks upon sovereign nations, it was indeed his attack upon Iran that detained us. And Iran has itself attacked Qatar. Qatar have tried to sort of cast themselves as peacemakers in this process. And so it's hard to exaggerate the significance of Netanyahu's decision to put them in the crosshairs. And it's so horrible now. It's been horrible since October the 7th, of course, but it's so intractable and it would seem inevitable, this constant ticking of the death toll and this incremental impunity that Benjamin Netanyahu seems determined to enjoy. How many people, for example, who remain understandably and correctly committed to the existence of the modern state of Israel, if they had been asked at the end of 2023 if they felt that bombing Qatar or bombing Iran or not moving heaven and earth to ensure the release of the hostages, in fact attempting to kill the people with whom you could the only people with whom you could negotiate the release of the hostages, how many would have supported these paths that Netanyahu has taken them down step by step, pace by pace, until you're left with either, the starkest of choices. Either you abandon your support for this regime and, I don't know, atone for or apologise for all that you have helped visit upon the people of Gaza and beyond, or you double, triple, quadruple down and pretend that it is in any way justified, what is now unfolding. Even Donald Trump. And, of course, it's Wednesday, so he could say precisely the opposite tomorrow when it's Thursday. In fact, he might say precisely the opposite by tea time. But even the United States, that's not even Donald Trump, let's get it right, has expressed unhappiness at what is unfolding, and I think understandably some focus of media in this country, that focus of attention in this country, moves to the imminent arrival of the Israeli president and his meeting later today with Sir Keir Starmer, and it could be that I'm knitting too much together into one place here, but I think that you can see the wisdom of this line of inquiry. I hope you can. If you can't, you know what to do. You can ring me up and tell me. But there are a number of reasons why the visit of the Israeli President Isaac Herzog is controversial. He has claimed that there are, and I quote, no innocent civilians in Gaza. It's in the immediate aftermath of October the 7th. He insisted that an entire nation is responsible. He was also photographed personally writing messages on shells that were later deployed in Gaza, where over 50,000 people have now been killed, and where a plurality of international genocide scholars, I think, I don't know if anyone has counted all of them, but the votes keep coming back and the testimony keeps being published, stating that Israel is indeed continuing to commit genocide. So, even if there are still question marks over that conclusion, which in terms of international law there are, writing messages on shells that are going to be deployed in the killing of civilians seems to me to be a slightly odd path to go down. But it seems also to be a path that Benjamin Netanyahu has now blown up. Because even yesterday I felt compelling arguments that you need to welcome this this character, even with his comments, his hideous comments, actually, about there being no innocent civilians in Gaza. That is a precursor to genocidal ambition. If you're saying every single person there is guilty, then you are creating circumstances for genocide, I think, inevitably. And if the argument is that in order to ensure a ceasefire, to bring about a cessation of hostilities, to stop the killing, to stop the ethnic cleansing, to stop the genocide, if you are of the view that is what is unfolding, then you need to keep the lines of communication open. And history has taught us that you have to negotiate with everybody in order to bring about peace. I think of Northern Ireland often when I turn my attention to matters Middle Eastern, and I don't know what the equivalent would be today. If Margaret Thatcher had thought or had information that senior members of the IRA were holed up in a very specific corner of Derry or Ulster or Belfast, could she have bombed the whole street? Would she have enjoyed support if she'd bombed the whole street? In the aftermath, perhaps, of the Brighton bombings, would there have been an appetite in this country for parts of Northern Ireland where Republican terrorists were being sheltered to be destroyed? Because you were targeting exclusively the terrorists, and if anybody else got killed in the meantime, then hey-ho, that's showbiz. I don't know. I'm just always searching for parallels, historical precedents, and I'm running out now. I've been running out for some time because there would always be consequence. There'd always be action. There'd always be international intervention to pause or stay the hand of a leader determined to do what? Can you even answer that question now? What is he determined to do? To protect Israel at all costs? It doesn't seem to be going very well, certainly in the context of international public opinion. I don't think the modern state of Israel has ever been less popular than it is today. And that's a tragedy. There are people who don't like the idea of a two-state solution, and the one-state solution they envisage would involve the end of Israel as we know it. I think those people are profoundly wrong and often quite disgusting. But goodness me, the support that you need to sustain is being hemorrhaged by the actions of one man, of Benjamin Netanyahu. And the idea, again, I'm throwing a lot at you today, but I promise it all slots together like a jigsaw. Because, again, if you look at the history of hostage release, I think that of the 148 who have been returned alive to Israel, it may have gone up overnight, but 140 were released and 8 were rescued by the Israeli military. You've also had several bodies of deceased hostages returned by Hamas, often that too a consequence of negotiation. And the massive majority of those released alive were set free as part of 2 ceasefire agreements, and those ceasefire agreements were negotiated by Hamas leadership. So if you're still clinging to the notion that Netanyahu is in any way motivated by seeking the release of the hostages, you'd have to be able to answer the question of why 140 of them, or a massive majority of 140 of them, have been released as a consequence of negotiation and ceasefire agreements. Why would you then seek to kill the people with whom you conduct those ceasefire negotiations? I think this is a really important question. Again, I'm just a gob on a stick. Sometimes I see things that I think are really interesting and insightful, particularly when a story is developing live in front of us, and I have the great honour of being in your ear live, and sometimes I get it horribly wrong. But that seems to me to be a huge problem for anybody claiming, oh no, we have to negotiate, we have to invite the Israeli president, despite his hideous comments about innocent civilians in Gaza. Spoiler alert, he doesn't think there are any. Presumably newborn babies would count. I don't know. Is it 1 month old, 2 months old that they become culpable, they become guilty, they become fair game for the missiles upon which he scrawled messages? That we have to keep the lines of communication open because it's the only way that negotiations can be successfully completed. But then his boss bombs the negotiators. His boss bombs the negotiators. And anybody paying attention, and this isn't an opinion, it's counting, can tell you that negotiated ceasefires have brought about the release of many more hostages alive than military intervention. I think the figure rescued by the IDF currently stands at 8. So even that argument, which I haven't really heard, I think Nick had a caller today making that argument, but I mean, I don't even know if they believe it anymore. The argument that Netanyahu is in any way motivated by the release of the hostages when his every action, and many of the families of hostages, of course, agree with this, but his every action does the opposite. I am shaking with fear, said the father of one hostage still held. It could be that in these very moments the Prime Minister has actually assassinated my Matan. Why does he insist on blowing up any chance of a deal? I'll say that again. Einav Zangauka, who is the father of one of the hostages still held there, Matan, wrote on social media, I am shaking with fear. It could be that in these very moments, the Prime Minister has actually assassinated my Matan. Why does he insist on blowing up any chance of a deal? But you get some self-appointed expert on social media or on phone-in radio claiming that this is all being undertaken in order to ensure the release of hostages, the massive majority of whom have only been released as a consequence of negotiations with the people that Netanyahu has just tried and largely failed to kill. Are you still with me at the back? So, what is the point of meeting the Israeli president if his boss is trying to kill the negotiators? 0345 6060 973. What is the point? Is there, and that's question number one. Question number two is, watching what you're watching now and noting even Donald Trump saying that the latest action is, I mean, he wouldn't use a word like unconscionable, I don't think, but that is the issue that he's dancing around. So even Donald Trump can't bring himself to support this. There's still dispute over whether or not he supported the action in Iran, whether or not he knew before it in advance or he pretended that he did because the alternative would have been even more embarrassing, but it was nothing like the success claimed by both Israel and by Donald Trump. So this notion that you have to keep the lines of communication open surely falls to smithereens when the other side in the negotiations tried to kill the people that they're supposed to be negotiating with. Doesn't it? Well, I mean, what is the point of rolling out a red carpet today for the Israeli president when yesterday the people that we are, or the people that they are supposed to be negotiating with, were targeted by the Israeli regime? That's a question. I don't think it's a rhetorical question. There may be answers that you can provide that I currently can't see, but who's going to negotiate now if you've tried to kill them? I think one of the negotiators' sons may have been killed. How does that help the hostages? Oh, we would like to reopen negotiations. You just killed my boy. I can't, man alive. So, is there any point whatsoever in maintaining diplomatic relations, or whatever you want to call them, with an administration that, I mean, I don't even know what the words are anymore. When you knit all of these things together, the simple question that if you want to negotiate a ceasefire, you have to negotiate with these people. They are the only available people to negotiate with. And you are trying to kill them, which tells you everything you need to know about Netanyahu's genuine desires for ceasefires, for settlements, for hostage releases even, perhaps, and for peace. Spoiler alert, he has no desires for any of those things. Have I got this right? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. It's surely absolutely indefensible now to argue that there is any point whatsoever calling for a negotiated settlement. And if Netanyahu has killed that stone dead, if he has, to use the words of one of the fathers of a hostage still held in captivity by, or in Gaza, probably by Hamas, he has actually assassinated my son. Why does he insist on blowing up any chance of a deal? Actually, let's answer that question. Let's pay this man the respect of treating his question as if it is not rhetorical. Why does Benjamin Netanyahu, to quote the father of a hostage in Gaza, one of the 20 still believed to be alive. He would like to know why Benjamin Netanyahu insists on blowing up any chance of a deal. Why do you think Benjamin Netanyahu insists on blowing up any chance of a deal? That is question number one. Absolutely front and centre. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. Why does Benjamin Netanyahu insist on blowing up any chance of a deal? While some well-meaning, but some, I think, now probably not well-meaning supporters of his pretend to believe or have somehow persuaded themselves that his actions are justified by a desire to release hostages. The dad of a hostage is saying, why has he blown up any chance of a deal? That's question number one. Why has Benjamin Netanyahu chosen to blow up any chance of a deal? 03456060973. And does this latest atrocity, does this latest attack upon an ally of Western powers, a sovereign nation, does this latest attack make a complete mockery of the argument that there's any point in having lines of communication open, in having negotiations ongoing, or indeed in hoping that George may actually overcome war? What is the point of talking to Netanyahu's administration when he's made attempts upon the lives of the people he needs to talk to ensure the sort of ceasefire that has proved to be the single most successful way of securing the release of hostages? God, that's bleak. I knew where I was going this morning, but I didn't have all of the strands knitted together. That's so bleak. And not just for the families of the hostages, for the civilians still being ethnically cleansed in Gaza and possibly in the West Bank, for people in Qatar now worried about their security. How can anyone now defend this? But crucially, how can anybody claim that there's any point whatsoever in negotiating? 03456060973. Simple question, actually, for once on this programme. And inevitably, it's not my question, it's the question posed by Einav Zangaka, who asks, why does Benjamin Netanyahu insist on blowing up any chance of a deal? Has he actually assassinated my son? It's 10:20.
James O'Brien on LBC.
2 minutes after 10, and it is a question with a heartbreaking resonance. It is they are the words of a man whose son, Matan, is among the Israeli hostages still being held in captivity in Gaza. And he is asking today why Benjamin Netanyahu insists on blowing up any chance of a deal. And I would like you to try to tell him. Hafsa is in Cairo to kick things off. Hafsa, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Good morning.
Hello.
It sounds maybe even bleaker than what you have presented, but in reality, I think it's about time that almost 2 years into this, we start internalizing what Israel's Prime Minister and their cabinet have said from day one. The hostages have been collateral damage, and this is about.
There's a full stop there. Just to be completely clear, they haven't said that the hostages will be collateral damage. It sounded like that's what you were suggesting. There's a full stop in your words. I'm hypersensitive on this subject, as you will understand. Okay. Carry on.
No, and this is ultimately about a bigger project, a bigger moment. Much of what we've seen in the last 2 years, propelled by Hamas's attack in October, has been decades in the making for Israel, for the IDF, for Mossad, all the intelligence gathering. This idea of a greater plan to reshape the Middle East, targeting Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Iranian regime, instigating all of this. The October 7th attack is the justification, but this plan has been decades in the making, and nothing will stop them. And we've seen the limitations of the US's desire or willingness or ability to politically rein Israel in. And yesterday, I'm sitting in the region. I live in the Gulf region as well. I've lived there for years. I cannot. You said at the beginning of your introduction about exaggerating what happened yesterday. The region is fundamentally altered. But the GCC, the Gulf region, was attacked in this way with no kind of orchestrated forewarning in the way that we saw with the attack on El Udeid in June. this is fundamentally changing the entire threat perception across the region. And the talk or bluster from the Israelis about population transfer across the West Bank and Gaza is now a reality. The Egyptians have spent the last few days panicked. It's all over social media here in Egypt. Jordan the same. This is now a region, arguably the entire region is at war. And this is the peak of what some of us, me at least in the region, have been talking about for the last 2 years. For the hostages and the hostage families, unfortunately, the presentation by the Israeli government is that they are, much like Palestinians, human fodder to be utilized and used when necessary. But Netanyahu has never been interested in the ceasefire deal, and the Trump administration is clearly not interested in pushing for a material ceasefire deal that would involve bringing the hostages home, dead or alive.
I mean, inevitably, and people who really should know better even choose to quote this. Donald Trump using capital letters on social media at the weekend to say that Hamas must accept my terms. I have warned about the consequences of not accepting. This is my last warning. There will not be another one. And one commentator in the Daily Telegraph today uses that to seek to justify what happened to Qatar. You haven't... I know you have, but it may be a slightly inappropriate thing for me to ask, but if you were speaking directly to this man, to Einav Zangoka, whose son is among those in captivity still, he will have a grasp of the facts. He will know about the context that you describe and the possibility of what you're describing, but his confusion sounds genuine. You would say to him, when he says, why does Netanyahu insist on blowing up any chance of a deal, you would say because he wants the borders of the state of Israel to extend far beyond where they are now, and nothing else matters to him except his own political survival.
I would just caveat that last bit, because what we did see in the immediate aftermath of the strike, which we should also add is a massive intelligence blunder, because they didn't actually successfully target any of the leaders they were trying to target in this brazen attack. But I would add that in the immediate aftermath, we got massive celebrations from across the political spectrum in Israel, barring one or two, like former National Security Advisor Eran Etzion. So the bigger problem is for this man who I'm shaking in terms of empathy for what people across the board have been going through the last 2 years. But the reality is that this is not just Netanyahu's war. Particularly the greater question of the war with Iran has been something that the Israeli political and many parts of the security elite have bought into and planned and prepared for years. And the bigger problem and question for those inside Israel that don't agree with it is, what can you do within the political landscape to change not just the question of removing Netanyahu, but to change the political discourse, the question of national security, the question of internal security. We had a terror attack in Jerusalem just a few days ago. I think it was on Sunday. 6 civilians were killed. The problem is now that for years, Israeli citizens have not been faced with the reality of occupation. And since October 7th, they have had to face the reality of occupation and the question of deterrence through occupation, through annexation, through apartheid. The question for the Israeli public is whether it's what legal mechanisms there are or political messaging and discourse that can change and fundamentally alter this trajectory, because this current trajectory is not going to bring the hostages home. It's not going to make Israel any safer. It's not going to make the region any safer. And fundamentally, the message from the Arab states over the last 2 years has been, we do not sign up to this trajectory.
And yet Netanyahu thinks he can keep pushing, doesn't he? And no one will ever push back. So, I mean, the comments of Donald Trump, they're not exactly unequivocal, but it's clear. Well, you can hear them for yourself.
I'm not thrilled about the whole situation. It's not a good situation. But I will say this: we want the hostages back, but we are not thrilled about the way that went down today.
You were caught by surprise, sir?
I'm never surprised by anything, especially when it comes to the Middle East. I was very unhappy about it. very unhappy about every aspect, and we got to get the hostages back. But I was very unhappy about the way that went down.
I mean, it doesn't matter what Donald Trump says, because he can say the opposite tomorrow and his relationship with the truth is, well, strain doesn't even come close. But it does speak to the idea that Netanyahu thinks he can act with complete impunity. And that, of course, leads us back to the question asked by Eino Zangaka, who is, I should apologise, a woman, not a man. A bit casual sexism from me there. And I know which woman she is as well. She's the lady who used to work as a house cleaner and has become a particularly potent thorn in the side of Benjamin Netanyahu as she prays for the release of her son from captivity in Gaza. Why does the Prime Minister of Israel insist on blowing up any chance of a deal? And if you want to bring events closer to home, what does that analysis do to the argument that Keir Starmer has to meet with the President of Israel today because reasons? 10:30 is the time. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 33 minutes after 10. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I mean, where are we now? The idea that the Israeli offensive against Gaza has made anybody safer seems to me to be questionable at the very least. But the slightly pat question of what the end game looks like, where does it lead? What are the things that we've put on that table during the months we've spent discussing this issue? I think at the top you'd have to put two elements of Netanyahu. One, his perilous personal political position. A little nod there to fans of alliteration. It is, I think, a given that if he were not engaged in this action, he would be in a dock. He would be in the dock in a court and quite possibly facing imprisonment. Possibly. So that would drive you probably to keep the fires burning, to keep the missiles flying. Then you've got the expressed desire to remove the threat that was never clearer than on October the 7th from Israel's own doorstep. Now, whether that means decapitating Hamas, and it may be hard to remember this, that was the original claim. At one point, they were claiming that they were being very, very careful not to kill civilians. I think quite possibly that he still does. Make of that what you will. I mean, either he's lying when he says that, or he's incredibly bad at doing what he says he's trying to do. So then you've got that bit, the eradication of the threat. So you decapitate Hamas. And I don't know, perhaps some people can morally justify killing tens of thousands of civilians in the process. But that hasn't happened. Not least because the heads of Hamas weren't even in Gaza. So again, there's a sort of... it's a knot that unravels itself. Why have you killed so many civilians in Gaza? Because we're going after Hamas. But their leaders are in Qatar. How do you know that? Because you just bombed Qatar in an attempt to get the leaders. I suppose when your support is based upon emotion rather than reason, you can do whatever the hell you want, which is where the parallels between Netanyahu and Trump are surprisingly strong. If your support has nothing to do with reason and everything to do with emotion, and don't be condescending about that. Most of us make some of the biggest decisions of our lives based upon emotion, like getting married. But if your political support is based entirely on emotion, it's a kind of great characteristic of populist politics, then it doesn't really matter what you do. You can do whatever you want. And the contradictions don't matter. You know, you can say we need to do this because X, and then we need to do that because X isn't true. You can do it the very next day. But where does this go? And how can anybody sit here now and say it's worth negotiating with Netanyahu? It's pretty questionable negotiating with Hamas, but ceasefires were previously achieved and were broken not by them. And they were in the process of negotiating this one. Or at least they said they were. Again, take everything from everyone with a pinch of salt. But the claim was that Hamas's negotiating team was communicating with mediators about the latest US proposal for a ceasefire and hostage release deal. And Netanyahu tried to kill the negotiators or the people giving the negotiators their instructions. There's no way you can set this up as anything other than abominable. Appalling, which is why the mother of one of the hostages wants to know why he appears to be committed to blowing up any chance of getting him released. Why? 10:37 is the time. Jim's in Glasgow. Jim, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello, Jim.
As long as you've got people like Smodrich in the cabinet, right-wingers, telling him what to do, and Smodrich has already told him, if you don't do what we want you to do, as far as Gaza's concerned, we're going to pull you out of the cabinet, and you'll have a minority, and then you'll be out of power, which means you'll be going to jail, obviously. But apart from that, Smodrich has already come out and said there's no innocent Palestinians in Gaza.
Well, quite a few of them have said that. In fact, the president that Keir Starmer will be breaking bread with later today has said that. And it's a horrible bit of rhetoric, that, isn't it? The idea that you become a fair target the moment you're born in a certain part of the world or into a certain ethnicity or faith. It's a horrible, horrible thing.
Exactly. And remember, we helped draw this map in Gaza in 1945. So maybe he should be sitting down with the president and having a wee word about that.
Well, I mean, some of the stuff, inevitably, it's not a criticism of you. There's always echoes of previous phone-ins when we discuss this, but I'm trying to look forward now. And what can possibly be achieved now by... I mean, if you were even, God forbid, in a position to give advice to Hamas's negotiating team, they're just going to respond to every single thing that any international contributor has to say by saying, yeah, but he just tried to kill us.
Yeah, it's like I'm going to go by with that again. It's like Putin saying to damn it, I'll meet you, but you'll have to come to Moscow. So, I mean, that's never going to happen. So, as far as Gaza's concerned, we know what they're up to, and they're already getting into the mosque there and breaking all the rules. They've given permission for 3,500 houses to be built in Palestinian land. And we just sit and take it. They've been taking their land for years, and nothing's done about it. And
do you think anything ever will be? Spain has moved a little further. The European Union is now talking about sanctions. It's easy to shout too little, too late from the sidelines, but you know these things aren't easy. You've got, I mean, perhaps inevitably, you've got a ban on the man you initially referred to, Bezalel Smotrich. You've got a ban on Itamar Ben-Gvir in the pipeline for the Spanish government, their foreign minister making this clear on Tuesday. And they've removed their envoy from Tel Aviv. And inevitably, perhaps, the Israeli government have responded by accusing Spain's government of advancing anti-Semitic policies.
Exactly. That's the usual thing, isn't it? As soon as you mention anything about, you're going to do something, that's anti-Semitic. It's not on. I'm sorry, but we're scared of doing anything because we're the case of, Mr. Trump might get angry with us and put tariffs on us. That's what the bottom line is. Mr. Trump, I'm not going to call him president because he doesn't deserve it.
I mean, the statement that I think led to the accusation, or one of the things that led to that accusation of anti-Semitism, and I know you know this, Jim, but for the avoidance of any doubt whatsoever, there is very real and very virulent and very horrible anti-Semitism in the mix at the moment, and there always has been. But I don't quite see how saying stop the genocide in Gaza, pursue its perpetrators, and support the Palestinian population could be subject to that sort of accusation.
It's going too far, and I'm feeling really the United Nations really their hands are tied at the minute because the Guterres came out yesterday and condemned this attack on a state, but that's all they do. They can't do anything else.
We've never known. I mean, I don't think it's a bit like the founding fathers when they wrote the Constitution in the United States, never really conceiving of the possibility of somebody like Donald Trump popping up at some point in the future. It's as if the checks and balances, the system, isn't constructed to accommodate something so extraordinary. And I wonder whether international relations, I wonder whether policies, and going right back to Balfour, as you point out, in the 1940s, I wonder whether none of what has gone before is fit for purpose when it comes to this individual. It's odd, isn't it, how often we talk about individuals as opposed to countries or institutions. It is Vladimir Putin who is responsible for the war crimes in Ukraine. It is Benjamin Netanyahu and, of course, his far-right henchmen that you've just alluded to. But they are facilitators, not not creators. It is Benjamin Netanyahu who has set and pursued this hideous cause. It is Donald Trump in the United States of America who's responsible. I got a story this morning of a Northern Irish bloke being rounded up because he looked a bit Spanish. He looked a bit Hispanic. I may play you some words from his interview later in the programme. But the systems are not equipped. We've got our own sort of pound shop versions in Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage. The systems are not equipped to deal with people who are prepared to break all the conventions of civilised interaction, whether in war or whether in debate. If someone is prepared to lie like it's going out of fashion, off the top of my head, oh yes, I've bought a house. No, I haven't bought a house. Yes, I have bought a house. No, I haven't bought a house. Someone else bought a house. I haven't bought a house. Prepared to lie as easily as the rest of us breathe. What is the system supposed to do to keep up? I do not know. Thank you, Jim. 10:43 is the time. What does this do to the likelihood of negotiated peace? I would say it makes a mockery of the very idea, and probably it has always been thus. The question of why Netanyahu was so keen to blow up previous ceasefire agreements probably gets answered with the same words you'd use to answer this woman when she wants to know why her prime minister is blowing up any chance of a deal that might see her son released. Joshua is in Sorby. Joshua, Sorby Bridge, what would you like to say?
Hi there, James. You all right?
Very well, mate. What's on your mind?
I do think it's sort of the position of, I don't want to say being pro-Israel is indefensible anymore, but their original ideas of why it was so important to destroy Hamas and return the hostages. It's just, in my opinion, from yesterday, it's just that clearly wasn't that wasn't the idea, was it?
No, that's a good point. That's neatly put. Just it doesn't matter what you say your reason is for doing something. We have the right to use our own intelligence to wonder whether that's actually the real reason why you're doing something. And there's been a sort of slow spreading of the conviction that the reasons Netanyahu gives for doing what he does are not the truth. And actually, to go back to Jim, the public pronouncements of people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and even Herzog, who's sitting down with Keir Starmer today, give perhaps a better insight into what the real reasons are.
Absolutely. And again, what you were just talking to Jim about is that, the world is sort of strongman politics now, isn't it? And
but is there any point now? Donald Trump says he's put together a deal. He can't tell us what deal it is, but it's an amazing deal. It's the best deal. Israel have agreed to it, but he still can't tell us what it is. And now Hamas have to agree with it. And Hamas say that they're negotiating and about to send in the mediators for the latest US proposal. And then Netanyahu tries to blow them up. I mean, you can't stop trying, can you? You can't stop talking. Well, I mean, because what is the alternative? If you stop talking, what happens? What is the alternative if you stop talking?
Who steps in now? Because obviously Qatar's out the question. But I do feel like this was the plan all along, and October the 7th was the perfect excuse to execute this. Because I was watching an interview with Benjamin Netanyahu in, I think it was 1978,
right?
And he had this position that is now being executed perfectly back then. This idea that the West Bank could not belong to the Palestinians, Israel was from the river to the sea, and if there was going to be any sort of Palestinian state, it should be Jordan. And he's very clear about it. He's a brilliant speaker, and I think that's one thing that it's very hard to deny that he is a fantastic sort of communicator with that,
I haven't seen that interview, but I have read Max Hastings's reminiscences of a meeting with the younger, and it was indeed in the 70s when he was writing a biography of Netanyahu's brother, I think, and he quotes him here in his own memoirs, saying in the next year, quoting Netanyahu, "If we do it right, we'll have a chance to get all the Arabs out. We can clear the West Bank, sort out Jerusalem." And then he jokes about the Golani Brigade, which was an Israeli infantry force in which many of the soldiers were North African or Yemenite Jews, and he says they're okay as long as they're led by white officers. Max Hastings describes him as grinning. So, I've mentioned that quite a few times. over the course of the last couple of years, but I wonder if it lands a little bit more heavily in some people's consciences than it did before.
James O'Brien on LBC.
2:11 is the time. PMQs on the way, of course. I wonder what's going to pop up there. We can find out from 12 noon. Natasha will be joining us shortly before to give us a little flavour of what she thinks might happen. And as has become traditional on Wednesday, then we'll have a slightly deeper, longer look at 2 or 3 issues that are, or indeed people that are currently troubling the scorers on the news front. This is nice from Caroline. That sort of cheers up. It improves the mood, lightens the mood somewhat. Morning, James, she writes. I dreamt last night that I went on a field trip to a museum with you and some other listeners. It was fun. Cheers. Thank you, Caroline. I don't think we should... Well, you think we should start having outings? Might be quite nice. Start going on field trips and outings. I don't think we'll start sharing dreams, though. That could be very, very odd. I'm so conceited that sometimes if I appeared in someone else's dream, I've got a particular interest in what I was up to, which is the maddest thing imaginable when you think about it, because it has absolutely nothing to do with you, does it? What's popped up in somebody else's dream. But I find it fascinating. Somebody says, I dreamt about you last night. I really, really, really want to know what happened in your dream. But in no other circumstances do I ever want to know what happened in your dream unless I was in it. Oh, God, I had a terrible... Guess what I dreamt about last night? Was I in it? No, don't care. 10:52 is the time. What does this mean? There used to be, in a way, there is a kind of... what would you call it? A kind of diabolical beauty to some of the rhetorical devices used to defend Benjamin Netanyahu. I mean, the latest one is, and it's these words have been also issued by the head of the IDF, saying that if you do not release the hostages immediately, you will be annihilated and Gaza will be destroyed. And you sort of find yourself thinking, well, okay, let's crack on with that negotiation. Or you find yourself thinking, well, why did you blow up the last ceasefire, which had successfully secured the release of many hostages, way more than have been rescued by the IDF. I mean, the huge majority of hostages returned alive have been returned alive as a consequence of ceasefire and negotiation. So why did you tear up the last one, and why do you keep insisting that you want a ceasefire and you want a negotiation while trying to kill the negotiators? So for a long time that looks really clever, because it sort of closes down criticism. No, we're only killing them because we want the hostages back. Okay, but if you negotiate, then you'll get the hostages back. History has shown us that, and you blew up the ceasefire. But still some people will say that we're only killing them because it's the only way to get the hostages back, when events have shown that it just isn't. In fact, you could argue quite the opposite, which is what the mother of this hostage has done. I'm now getting a few messages from people telling me what role I play in their dreams. I don't think I'll be reading many of them out. 10:53 is the time. Let's go to Islington. Deanna is there. Deanna, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello.
Hello, Deanna. How can you sound surprised? Is it because I was wanging on so much that you'd almost nodded off at the other end of the phone? Because you did ring me.
Something like that,
yes, fair enough. Carry on. I'll be quiet for a while.
Your producer said she was going to put me through to speak to you, but I told her I might become a gibbering wreck.
Well,
so
there's no danger of that, I'm sure, Deanna. What would you like to say?
I don't think so.
Carry on.
I got back from a short visit to Israel yesterday evening, and it was all... a lot of it was very upsetting.
I'm sure.
And extremely upsetting this morning to hear the news about the bombing of Qatar. The reason I went to Israel was because a very dear friend of mine there has recently had a horrible diagnosis, and as a result, her son's wedding was brought forward. So I went over for a few days to see my friend and to go to the wedding. And in those short few incredibly intense days, I had lots of conversations with people. And as I said to your producer, they're of a similar mindset to me, who feel that Netanyahu is, a megalomaniac, heartless, kind of possibly living in a fantasy world, but possibly not. The fantasy part of it is when they talk about eliminating Hamas, because to me that just sounds really odd. You can kill certain people, but you can't kill an ideology. And actually what they're doing is spawning more hatred towards Israel.
I've been thinking that since whenever that moment of pivot came and anybody and everybody who I still think rightly said Israel must respond to the October the 7th atrocity, and it must respond very robustly, but it mustn't go too far. And then slowly almost everybody has reached the point in the ensuing months and years that they have now gone too far. But the major rationale for why you must not go too far has always been because you're going to use your word, you're going to spawn the next generation of enemies. You're going to spawn the next generation of people who wish Israelis harm, and yet here we are. He must know that. How do you think he squares that? They're going to be so far away. Our borders are going to have been pushed back so far that they won't be able to hurt us anyway.
I can't possibly get into the mind of why a man thinks that. I mean, I think it's just about power, hanging on to his power, and he's also got these two maniacal messianic nutters, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, who are propping up his government. So he needs to go along with their also fantasy kind of thinking about the greater Israel and that kind of thing in order to hold on to their power.
So I was talking to Simon Marks yesterday about Donald Trump, and I think there are parallels to be drawn on some levels. And Simon, I asked him a question, and I realised before I'd even finished asking it that it was a really stupid question, because it would involve Donald Trump having a very clear plan about where he wanted to be next November or next October and what he wanted to be doing next October. And I think we may have fallen into a similar trap with Netanyahu. I don't dismiss or dispute the analysis that a greater Israel is his dream. He said so in the 1970s. But in the context of his daily decisions, it's probably a lot more short-term. It's, as you say, well, how am I going to keep Smotrich and Ben-Gvir sweet? Oh, I know. I'll bomb Qatar. I'll bomb Iran. I'll do this. I'll go and blow up some more buildings in Gaza. It may not be that the route he has planned is actually very long. It's just about staying where he is and keeping everybody he needs to keep him where he is sweet.
I think that's right. I mean, I went to one of those mass rallies in Hostage Square in Tel Aviv on Saturday evening, and it was very moving. It was absolutely huge, massive, with some speakers. One of the speakers was the partner of that guy Matan, who's still hostage, that you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
Another of the speakers was a teenage daughter of another one of the hostages who's been killed in captivity, one of the Sharabi brothers. Gosh. The other Sharabi brother was released a few months ago. So, it was extremely moving. They also had these huge screens up with footage of some of the footage was of the 7th of October attacks. Yes. I mean, I needed to ask my friend for the tissues. It was a very moving event. But they were also, there was somebody there giving a speech. He is an actor. I think his name is Tzachi Halevi.
Right.
And he's quite well known in Israel for, I don't know what he's been in, but he's a Jewish Israeli, and he's married to an Arab Israeli woman, Lucy Harish, I think her name is, who's a newsreader and stuff like that. And, he seemed amazing. And I was talking to my friend that I went there with, well, who are the leaders on the left who can somehow challenge Netanyahu? She said that's one of the big problems. There's nobody who emerges as a charismatic, honest leader. She said there are about 6 people milling around, but they're into their own egos and they're arguing with each other. So the left can't even come out with a coherent sort of leadership figure.
Do you know the phrase? I couldn't think of the phrase yesterday, and I said maypole for some reason and started talking about people dancing it. But you're describing a rallying point for opposition, and that has to be a person. The rallying point for opposition has to be an individual person, and there isn't one at the moment.
There isn't one. It's very depressing. And my friend also said to me that she said, never mind the war and our enemies and the borders. She said, we are destroying ourselves from within. And it was all so upsetting.
That is heartbreaking. And I know some people will struggle to feel sympathy for what you described, but I am not one of them. From the very outset, one of my biggest fears, beyond the carnage in Gaza, has been that Israel's leadership would commit the ultimate betrayal of the Israeli people, of the Israeli population. Deanna, thank you so much. One of the opposition leaders that Deanna refers to perhaps proves her point with his words last night. Hamas members deserve death, he posted, but at this point the Israeli government needs to explain how the IDF's action will not lead to the killing of the hostages and whether the risk to the hostages' lives was taken into account. Perhaps there is quite a lot of room for a more robust contribution. I don't know. It is 11 o'clock.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 11 is the time. I mean, none of us were there. Well, actually, looking at some of the coverage, you could argue that everyone was there except us. I speak of Jeffrey Epstein's various homes and houses where the great and the good of the world from all political backgrounds were routinely wined and dined and quite possibly indulged in much more sinister and criminal acts. Epstein himself, of course, is a convicted paedophile. He's also, or was, Peter Mandelson's best pal. How do we know that? Because that's what Peter Mandelson wrote in a letter included within, I think we still have to say, an alleged birthday book released by US lawmakers. And one of the reasons why we have to say an alleged birthday book is that Donald Trump contributed an even more unpleasant message and continues to deny that it was him. I was thinking about this on the way home. I failed to construct a pithy distillation of my thoughts. If this is a hoax, how was it a hoax? If Donald, and this is not dissimilar to what we're talking about with Benjamin Netanyahu, although with lower stakes, clearly much lower stakes. The idea that it doesn't matter whether something's true or not, all that matters is whether or not you can just get away with it for long enough for the world to turn and move on. So Trump's claiming it's a hoax, which has been left more or less untouched. It's out there. It's an alleged note and sleazy drawing that Donald Trump, and he talks about keeping secrets with Jeffrey Epstein. Secrets. What sort of secrets would you keep with a paedophile? I don't know. And how would that hoax have unfolded? This book is 22 years old. No one's disputing that at the moment, I don't think. It's been released by his estate. So did mysterious members of Jeffrey Epstein's estate get some kind of forensic forgers to find a 22-year-old piece of paper and a contemporaneous biro or a typewriter with a ribbon that has been very carefully preserved from 2022? Do you see what I mean? So was the hoax done then? Was it Biff out of Back to the Future? Who was? I kid you not. People never believe me when I tell them this, but the guy who wrote the film has actually confirmed that Biff was based on Donald Trump. So did he travel back in time to insert something into a book given to Jeffrey Epstein, knowing that at some point Epstein would be jailed for his child sex crimes and that he would... I mean, why would you want to do that? Who did the hoax? Donald? Who did the hoax? The Democrats. So why did you keep campaigning on the necessity of getting the contents of the Epstein files out there? There's a chap in one of your senior roles called, I think, and again, people may not believe me when I tell them, his name is Bongino. And another one called Kash Patel, who I think might be running the FBI these days. Absolute headbangers, a lot of them. But they were adamant, a massive conspiracy. Yes, we must get to the bottom of this story. And now Donald Trump says, there's nothing to see here. It's a Democrat hoax. And you sort of find yourself wondering how very, very senior members of his own administration could have been some of the biggest tub thumpers for the claims that he is now trying to claim are a Democrat hoax. Everything's a hoax if he doesn't like it. Russian interference in American politics is a hoax, which makes you wonder why the US administration has decided to stop contributing to efforts to limit Russian interference in Western politics. More on that story, if I remember, later this hour. But I think, again, it's evidence of my appalling news sense. Obviously, the UK ambassador to the US is a bigger story in the UK than the president of the US. And it is Peter Mandelson who finds himself today very, very, very much in the crosshairs of the UK media. And, in my view, rightly so. I can't help thinking of Andrew Windsor. Nobody really wants to think of Andrew Windsor, but he has been rendered persona non grata by his associations with Jeffrey Epstein, which continued long after Jeffrey Epstein had been convicted of crimes. And while Peter Mandelson has never, and I presume will never, be accused of the sort of abuses that Andrew Windsor was accused of by Virginia Giuffre, to whom he gave millions and millions and millions of pounds of his mother's money while simultaneously claiming that she wasn't telling the truth, Mandelson also maintained contact with Epstein after Epstein had been unmasked, or largely unmasked, as a profoundly unpleasant individual. Some of the footage that has emerged is profoundly unfortunate, particularly the one where Mandelson is in a bathrobe. But the message that he sent, just like Trump's yesterday, what's wrong with these men? Is it a bit hypnotic? I've never been more grateful that I have the opposite reaction to sort of power, as it were, or deference. It makes my skin crawl when I see people doffing their caps or tugging their forelocks. I'm comfortable, I don't want to sound like Peter Mandelson, I'm comfortable with epic wealth, as long as it is not used solely to expand epic wealth and crush the windpipes of everybody else. I think it's stupid to think that if we took all the money in the world and divided it up equally at 10 o'clock this morning, by 11 o'clock, by the 11 o'clock news bulletin, some people would have nothing and some people would be living in palaces again. That's the nature of humanity. What you need is a little bit of regulation of capitalism to make sure that people don't ride roughshod over humanity itself. But other people seem to just lose their... I nearly used an entirely inappropriate word there. Other people seem to lose their marbles in the presence of great wealth and power. I've seen it with yachts. I used to knock about with quite a lot of Greeks, and the desperation that some people had, including, I don't think I'm betraying any confidences, members of the royal family. Particularly after Britannia was decommissioned. But if you and look, they've got privacy issues and stuff like that. But running a big yacht is megabucks. And the royal family didn't have the megabucks. And if they did have the megabucks, they wouldn't be able to spend them on running a massive yacht. They had to sort of pretend that the royal yacht was somehow a national asset rather than just their private plaything. But even members of the royal family would be desperate to get a little bit of free yacht action from some of the very wealthy Greeks that I used to knock about with. It's madness. This... What's the word you have? This sort of... It's one of the few things, but it's not the only thing that I quite like about Jeremy Corbyn, is that he truly had some sort of immunity. Because almost all of us suffer from it a bit. You know, you want a slightly bigger house, you want a slightly faster car, you'd like a little bit more. He doesn't seem to have any of that, Jeremy Corbyn, and I like that. I'm not like that, sadly. I almost wish I was, but I like my trappings, I like my toys, I like my luxuries. But the mega rich, or the people with the appearance of being mega rich, are like magnets for a certain type of human being. And Mandelson's got a lot of form in this field. Mandelson seems to enjoy the trappings and company of extremely rich people far more than is healthy. It's got him into trouble before, hasn't it? When he secured some passports, helped secure some passports for the mega-rich Hinduja brothers, and then there was that time he was on a yacht, wasn't he, with Nat Rothschild? God, dear, this is going back in time. But he has a lot of form. But none of that fully explains how you could possibly have written the following. Once upon a time, an intelligent, sharp-witted man they call Mysterious parachuted into my life. This is just gross, isn't it? Once upon a time, I can't even do the voice. I can't. An intelligent, sharp... I wouldn't write this to anybody. I wouldn't write this to my mum. Something as oily and as sycophantic as this. I'm trying to think of the people I love most in the world. I wouldn't even dream of writing in these terms. A mysterious, an intelligent, sharp-witted man they call Mysterious parachuted into my life. You would spend many hours just waiting for him to turn up, and often, no sooner were you used to having him around, you would suddenly be alone again, leaving you with some, quotes, interesting, end quotes, friends to entertain instead. Or just some dogs to keep you company. Brackets, he wasn't always so keen on them. But then he would parachute back in, very occasionally taking you by surprise in some far-off places, or in one of his glorious homes he likes to share with his friends, brackets, yum, yum, close brackets, says His Majesty's Ambassador to the United States of America. Yum, yum. But wherever he is in the world, he remains my best pal. And then, of course, part of his defence, I think an originally quite crucial part of his defence, contained the claim that he had never had any kind of professional or business relationship with Epstein in any form, which is, on the one hand, a defence against accusations of impropriety, but on the other, an admission that the attraction to Epstein was entirely based upon what a top chap he was, the paedophile. Oh, nothing to do with business. No, nothing at all. I just really liked him. Who? The paedophile. Oh, okay. Yum. And the Telegraph reports today, and fair play to the Telegraph for this. I spend an awful lot of time taking the mickey out of the opinion pages of the Daily Telegraph because they are mad. Absolutely mad. They are beyond mad. If you took the maddest person in Madland and gave them a column in a newspaper, it would probably still be too sensible and sane to get onto the comment pages of the Daily Telegraph. But the news journalists, as I've said often, and not just because my late father used to be one of them, they still continue to do some incredible work. I got Rayner upside down, because I think, to defend myself, because I was on holiday and I thought they were just trying to cause trouble for her. But they did the digging on that, and they've done this as well. Robert Mendick, Connor Stringer and Ben Riley-Smith have the bylines on a story reporting that Epstein brokered a deal with Mandelson over the sale of a UK taxpayer-owned banking business after he had been convicted of child sex offences. The problem with stories like this is pretty simple, actually. It's very hard to know which thread to pull. So if you are salacious in your tastes, then you're probably focusing on the yum and the parachuting and the photographs and the just questionable nature of anybody socialising with a man whose house was apparently full of scantily clad teenage girls. It's another phrase you only ever hear in tabloid newspapers. Does anyone ever say scantily clad? Get back upstairs this minute, darling. You're scantily clad, and the postman's coming up the garden path. But I think this is a much bigger story. A £1 billion deal negotiated while Lord Mandelson was business secretary and only months after Epstein had been released from prison. It was a joint venture between the taxpayer-owned Royal Bank of Scotland and Sempra Energy. It was sold to JP Morgan in a deal on which Epstein gave advice to Lord Mandelson and to a chap called Jez Staley, a senior executive with JP Morgan, who has since been banned from the city over his relationship with the disgraced financier, which is about the nicest thing you can say about Jeffrey Epstein's subsequent CV. This, of course, after he'd been jailed. That, I think, is extraordinary. Convicted, forgive me, for child sex offences. Now, I suffer as much as the next man does from, and I won't say those two words together again. Obviously, it's upsetting an awful lot of you judging from my inbox, and I apologise, especially to people who are trying to have a snack. I suffer as much as the next man does from footballification, but my footballification isn't party-led, as I guess we proved with the comments a moment ago about Jeremy Corbyn. It's sometimes a bit personality-led, and that means it's not actually footballification, because if a Tory that I have made the mistake of getting to know or sitting next to at a function gets into trouble, I feel very sorry for them. In fact, it most recently happened, because I don't go to many functions, with the former Conservative MP David Warburton, who passed away last week and who I sat next to at a function. And I got on with him really, really well. So then when he found himself caught up in various allegations that he strenuously denied, the swell of warmth that I felt towards him before the scandals doesn't just disappear when the scandals emerge. Some scandals will be so big, some allegations so huge, that you can ignore any fellow feeling that you had. But with Angela Rayner, who I really like and really rate, it's almost impossible to leave your feelings at the door when you're trying to properly analyse their politics. I've met Mandelson once, I think, possibly twice, and I don't know him at all, and I don't like him or dislike him. So I think I'm in a fairly objective position on this one, despite the fact that it is the current Labour government who will be left once again embarrassed if he has to go. And there's your phone in. Does he have to go? I mean, he has to go, doesn't he? The only thing I can think of where you'd say, no, of course he should stay ambassador, is that he's ambassador to the court of King Donald. And if you're ambassador to the court of King Donald and what you're accused of is behaviour a bit like King Donald's behaviour, but possibly not as sleazy, then does that become a defence against calls for you to go? Do you have to go? I don't know. But I don't know how much about this story you are already aware. Epstein got an 18-month sentence after pleading guilty to procuring an underage girl. He served time in the private wing of the Palm Beach County Stockade in Florida and came out in July 2009. He then wrote to his private banker, this is the Jez Staley character, to say, this is Epstein, Peter will be staying over the This is after he's come out of jail. And we now know, thanks to the Telegraph, that Epstein advised both Mandelson and Staley on a massive $1 billion deal that unfolded after he had left jail. Can he stay? 034560 60973. And we'll do what we did with Rayner, all right? I want your answer to my question to be different from your answer to the question of do you like Peter Mandelson and did you like him last week? Because if you don't like Peter Mandelson and you didn't like him last week and you think he has to go over this, it's not like mega persuasive or convincing, is it? If you know, what I want is a very adroit analysis of this story and these facts. Because part of me, almost every day now, wonders whether I'm going absolutely bonkers. I'm sitting here on national radio talking about the UK's ambassador to the United States of America sending letters to a convicted paedophile in which he coins the phrase, yep, I said I wouldn't say that again. I'm turning into Peter Finch in Network. It's just insane how bonkers everything is. And it was, and this was supposed to be a new dawn when Keir Starmer got into Downing Street. And I don't know that I did hear any particular alarm bells go off when he sent Peter Mandelson to Washington, D.C. to be the ambassador. But I'm not being glib or facetious. Maybe he did it because they had Epstein in common, so they become like a kind of counterbalance to each other. Trump can't be too mean about Mandelson, and Mandelson can't be too mean about Trump because they both know where the Epstein-shaped bodies are. I don't even know anymore. I think he's got to go, doesn't he? Unless, and this, I'll give you 10 points if you want to try and argue this position, he can't sack Peter Mandelson because Donald Trump's arriving for a state visit in 10 minutes and his associations with Jeffrey Epstein are far more embarrassing and shameful than Peter Mandelson's could ever be. So if he sacks Peter Mandelson, the first thing a journalist does when Donald Trump gets here is say, how do you feel about Peter Mandelson being sacked for being friends with the bloke that you used to, knock about with? The bloke you fell out with, apparently, after he started stealing underage girls from you or stealing teenage girls from you. Different ages of consent in different countries, different states. So be careful precisely what language you use. But how can we be here having a conversation about our ambassador to... And the diplomatic corps is supposed to be... Well, you know what it's supposed to be. But in the court of King Donald, maybe there is a case for a bloke who stayed friends with a paedophile after he got out of jail to be our ambassador because he'll fit right in the Oval Office.
James O'Brien on LBC.
23 minutes after 11 is the time. I'm afraid I don't know who would be the sort of Laurie Magnus figure for an ambassador. It's not going to be the advisor on the ministerial code. I don't think it's going to be the Prime Minister's independent advisor on ethics. Might be someone in the Foreign Office. I genuinely don't know. But this is the maddest phone-in I can remember in a long time. And my apologies. And I will take some calls in a minute, but I've got a lot to get off my chest. John in Bromsgrove, don't go anywhere. I'll be with you imminently. I hadn't clocked how mad it is, because I think we're describing conduct that would finish the career of any other diplomat. But because this diplomat is in the court of Donald Trump, there's an argument that not only does his position become tenable, but that actually his position becomes stronger because he's got the same scandal on his CV that the president's got. So what the hell question am I asking this hour? That would be a good phone in. Give me a ring on 0345 6060973 and tell me what question you think I'm asking after 24 minutes of introduction. John's in Bromsgrove. He must know. John, what would you like to say?
The risk of being Captain Obvious, James, I think really Keir Starmer can't sack Mandelson while Trump is still dealing with this issue. it depends on the Trump US side of things.
Trump is not dealing with this issue. He told journalists yesterday that it is a dead issue.
Yeah, but clearly it's not. We're still talking about it. So, until it's sorted out from there, at the risk of upsetting Trump, the stakes are too high. We've been bending over backwards for so long to appease Trump that we just can't risk upsetting him, can we? So?
I don't think that is Captain Obvious by any stretch of the imagination. I think that's one of the most bonkers things I've ever heard. And the thing that makes it supremely bonkers is how bloody plausible, how blooming plausible it is.
Yeah, I think we have to wait. We have to be pragmatic.
Just stop for a minute. Just think about the conversation in Downing Street. Well, because Starmer is, he's a stand-up guy. And if his people do something wrong, their feet generally don't touch the floor. And if they do touch the floor, it's only while Laurie Magnus is getting his magnifying glass out and having a look at whether or not the ministerial code has been broken. And if it has, even if it's your own deputy, it's sayonara. Previous prime ministers would be forming squares around them and denying that they'd done anything wrong and trying to change the rule book in order to get them off the hook, but not this one. So he's sitting in Downing Street and he says, he has to go, doesn't he? And his advisor, I see a sort of Sir Humphrey type character, leaning across the desk and saying, well, not exactly, Prime Minister. Because, of course, Donald Trump stands accused of even more questionable associations with Jeffrey Epstein. So if you were to fire your ambassador, I want to get these words in the right order, John. If you were to fire your ambassador, our ambassador, His Majesty's, poor old king gets dragged into it again. He's going to have dinner with him next week. If you were to fire our ambassador to the United States for having questionable associations with a convicted paedophile, you would be creating quite a difficult situation for the President of the United States, who has even more questionable associations with the same convicted paedophile. Does that... that's what you're saying. Does it, when I repeat it back to you, are you still nodding along with yourself?
Yeah, it's not my personal values, James, but that's...
you think that's the real politics? I can't sack him.
I think it is.
I can't sack him because the sleaze of which he stands accused is as nothing compared to the sleaze of which Donald Trump stands accused and I don't know. I like it. It's a perfect introduction. I should have just spoken to you. Could have saved us all the misery of me trying to work out what I think about the subject. But has he got it? Is that it? So Mandelson is going to be safe because the sleazy associations he stands accused of are as nothing compared to the sleazy associations that the President to whom he is ambassador. I just can't get my head around it. Joe's in Enniskillen. And Joe, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
my goodness. This isn't a scandal, it's an aberration.
What's the difference?
It's not like something's just happened. This has been going on for so many years.
Yes, that's true. Yes. And most of it was already known, but not all of it, you see.
No, exactly. And now it's come out, the Mandelson link. He wasn't exactly cleaner than clean when he was loitering around under Blair. So, when are we as the UK going to stand up for ourselves and say none of this is acceptable? You've got a President of the United States basically saying that none of it's real, none of it's true, and no one's challenging him. You've got all of the international stuff going on with Israel and everyone else. It's like, can we please stop kowtowing? Mandelson needs to be dragged back.
I want you to... I didn't want to interrupt you too quickly. I want you to get as much off your chest as you can within reason.
Yeah.
But now I am going to steer you back, and you did it yourself at the end, to Mandelson. Yeah. Why does Mandelson have to be dragged back? Because if you discipline Mandelson for sleazy associations with Jeffrey Epstein, what on earth are you saying to Donald Trump?
All you're saying to Donald Trump, you need to be honest with your own people and get these files released.
That'd be ridiculous. Donald Trump's not going to pay the blindest bit of attention to Joe in Enniskillen or to Peter Mandelson or anybody on the side.
That's the issue then. Are we a strong country as the UK? Do we need to be listened to?
Okay.
Therefore, we need a strong ambassador and we need a strong Prime Minister to say, what on earth is going on with you lot over there?
So if he doesn't sack Mandelson, because to do so would involve sacrificing our access on the altar of our principles. In order, to keep the president sweet, we have to keep Mandelson in the job. You're pining for the days when a UK leader could have said, I don't care what the consequences are, I will do what is right.
Yeah, because if you... I love you too, James. If you switch it the other way...
Yes.
The way Trump's operating at the moment is I don't care what is right or wrong. I'm just going to say whatever I want to say.
I kind of know you're right on one level, but the phrase that appears in my mind on the other is political expediency.
Can I say something else,
pragmatism.
though?
Yeah, of course you can.
What about the poor king? He's got to have dinner with this man.
I know.
And his brother was also involved in all of this, and his late mother had to shell out £22 million to a woman who's now sadly departed.
Yeah.
He was in the middle of all of this. What on earth are they going to talk about over dinner?
Well, I've got a suggestion. They could talk about the scrapbook for Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday that contains a photo of him holding a novelty cheque bearing Donald Trump's signature, along with a note suggesting that Epstein sold him a woman for $22,500.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that the king, out of all of them, is enough of a...
I don't know, the poor old king.
His own man.
Well, I tell you what, if you were running communications for Buckingham Palace, you'd be over the moon about this, because everybody... The only thing you can say with any certainty in the whole of this mess, I feel very sorry for the king.
Yeah, I know.
The poor king. The poor old king. What's he done to deserve this? He's done probably more to shut his own brother out of the picture than anybody else has, and now he's going to have... I mean, at least the ambassador doesn't come, I don't think. The American ambassador doesn't come on a state visit from the US president. Otherwise, he could have had all three of them sat around the same table. I just, can you imagine that? You got Mandelson sitting there, you got Trump sitting there, you got the King sitting here, and then Andrew Windsor tries to gate crash because I have to come in. These are some of my closest friends. Oh Lord above! 11:31 is the time. Should he stay or should he go? Because if he stays, there will be trouble. But if he goes, it could be double. Here's Thomas Watts with you.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Is 11:34, excusez-moi. And the question is, well, I don't even know what the question is, to be honest with you. I mean, I do know what the question is. I'm not a complete amateur. How dare you? I'm not a complete amateur, I said. But should Keir Starmer fire Peter Mandelson because of his associations with Jeffrey Epstein? And I think, crucially, some of the things that possibly constitute grounds for dismissal are not new. And it is extraordinary that he maintained relations after Epstein had been convicted of child sex offences. I mean, that is... I mean, again, I'm with Joe in Enniskillen. You do wonder when things were things ever honourable? Were things ever respectable? I think that Boris Johnson broke everything, but Keir Starmer has sent Peter Mandelson to Washington to be US ambassador, despite the fact that he retained relations with Jeffrey Epstein long after the latter had been exposed as a particularly unpleasant individual. Extraordinary. And then the new bit, which I think adds to the calls for discipline, calls for dismissal, would involve the apparent refutation of his claim that he'd done absolutely nothing with Epstein on a commercial or business footing, whereas the Daily Telegraph reports today that, on the contrary, he received advice as business secretary from Epstein when he was working on the sale of a taxpayer-owned banking business. That, if true, and the Telegraph reports it absolutely straight today, seems to me to be a bit of a deal breaker. Mandelson has been very rueful and regretful about his associations with Epstein on various occasions, saying, I wish I'd never met him. And even more than that, he regretted the hurt that Epstein had caused to young women. But, does that change anything? I've got two Davids up next. Honestly, you wait ages for a David to come along and then two come along at once. Let's go to Milton Keynes first and then Bayswater. David in Milton Keynes, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I'd like to say, well, first of all, I'm ready for my mauling.
But I don't maul people. How dare you?
Oh, you do. There we are. You're mauling me already.
Not mauling you at all. I'm tickling you. Carry on.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. It's madness to get rid of Mandelson.
Why?
are we going to...
Sounds like a song. It sounds like a Cole Porter song. It's madness to get rid of... Oh, no, Noel Coward. It's madness to get rid of Mandelson. Why?
Well, we're not going to cancel the state visit.
No.
We're not going to cancel the dinner with the King. Everybody knows what Trump's been up to. Mandelson is definitely the best person to deal with him. Even more so now, because as you've quite rightly pointed out, they're in the same boat together. Mandelson is nowhere near as culpable as Trump.
No.
British interests. Trump. These problems, and that's why he's still seeing the King.
So I love this when callers create this polarity that I hadn't fully spotted myself. So I've got Joe in Enniskillen in one corner and then you and other callers in the other. And you are all about political expediency and she is all about principle. Because you would, on principle, accept that we shouldn't be going anywhere near Donald Trump and therefore Peter Mandelson's defence that you've offered up becomes ridiculous. Anyone who stayed pals with a paedophile after they got out of jail disqualifies themselves from public office, surely.
Yeah,
on
but we've got no choice but to deal with Trump. Therefore, we should use the best person to do it.
And that is arguably Peter Mandelson, and possibly even more so now that they're both getting tarred with this. So, I mean, when Trump says it's a non-story, it's quite helpful to have the UK ambassador agreeing with you. He told the Financial Times to F off, David. Did you know that?
No, I didn't actually.
No, he actually said the Financial Times are obsessed with Epstein. Why don't you just... I nearly dropped one there. Why don't you just F off? So that's very much Trump's approach to the story as well. So you're right, you could be right. They're like Tweedledum and Tweedledummer when it comes to this particular story. I don't know. I mean, I've got a feeling, even though I said to Joe in Enniskillen, I love you, and you'll notice I haven't said that to David, because I love principle and I don't love political expediency. But it doesn't mean that David trumps. If this was a game of cards, Joe doesn't trump David with principle. I suspect David trumps Joe. To really labour that pun, I suspect David trumps Joe with it's political expediency. That's a phrase that Chris reminded me of in a message a moment ago. And is it? And also, have we all gone mad? I mean, does it really make Mandelson's position stronger that he has associations with a convicted paedophile that are comparable to the associations that the President of the United States have? The bit of the story that I can't believe journalists haven't dug into deeper is the bit where Trump, and I kid you not, defends himself from some of the accusations of association by saying that they fell out over Epstein's poaching of young women from his country club. So, they both had a use for young women. Trump in his country club, Epstein in his houses, and Epstein started offering jobs to some of the young women that were working in Trump's country club. It sounds disgusting, doesn't it? Whichever way you dice it. And maybe in a disgusting world, you need an ambassador who speaks the language. And that would be, in this case, Peter Mandelson. From David in Milton Keynes to David in Bayswater. David, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, I'm James. I don't think any of us have the right to be judge and jury. I know there's...
Well, that's me out of a job then. Come off it.
Well, I know that there's guilt by association, but it doesn't mean that he condoned any of the behaviour associated to young women. And I know you don't like the fact that maybe he likes being with rich people, but that's his prerogative. Yes. You can't use that as a criticism. I was using it more as an explanation as to how he keeps getting himself into this kind of trouble, whether it's a Russian oligarch or an Indian billionaire or an American paedophile. All they have in common is epic wealth, and that seems to be a light to which he is attracted in a moth-like fashion, David. That's all. Well, we all have our vices, don't we, James?
Yes, we do. We absolutely do.
We can't be too critical. And he seems to be good at his job with Trump. He seems to have some influence. So and also, I must get this point in quickly, James. We're having a visit by Herzog of Israel, President Herzog.
Yes.
And why people are associating with that man from a state which is accused of war crimes and genocide? People associated with him who are meeting him, should they resign? If we take the morality to a different level, then, and look at Keir Starmer, he took those gifts. He wasn't asked to resign, and he was perfectly aware of what he was doing. So it's all what I don't know.
I don't think staying friends with someone after they've been convicted of child sex offences.
Yes, I agree with that.
It's not on the same level as getting some free spectacles paid for by a very rich mate.
Yeah.
Is it?
On that point, I do agree.
Oh, thank goodness for that. I mean, it's bad enough trying to cling on to my sanity.
Yeah, but James, this is my final point. I honestly do think it's sad that it's important we talk about this, but this visit by the Israeli president
I did that in the first hour. Everyone's a critic.
Oh, you did? I missed it. I'm so sorry, James. I'm wasting your time. Sorry, James. I was having breakfast.
What do you mean you were having breakfast? You can't have breakfast with the radio on now?
No, I'm really... I have to concentrate, James.
This is outrageous. Do you think I do this for my own amusement? I did a whole hour on Israel and Herzog's visit and the consequences and the contradictions.
I'm really sorry I missed
You're ringing in to criticise me for not talking about the thing I spent an hour talking about, David, honestly.
Yeah.
We all have our vices, and yours is paying far too much attention to your breakfast.
Oh, dear.
I can think of worse vices. It is 11:43, thank you. I mean, I don't quite buy that. And I don't know how much of the full context of the story David is aware of, but and quite a few of you are sending me messages about Jimmy Savile, which might sound a bit odd, but isn't, because an awful lot of the great and the good turned out to have been very good mates with Jimmy Savile, up to and including members of the royal family and Margaret Thatcher. So, could you subsequently say that they have to be removed from their post for not realising how unpleasant someone was back in the day? And at that point, I think, the fact that relations remained cordial after the imprisonment is that, to me, David's very good contribution notwithstanding, that to me is a deal breaker. This is where I go all Joe in Enniskillen. It's all very well talking. We've got to keep him sweet. We've got to do political expediency. You can't fire the UK ambassador for, quotes, offences, end quotes, that are nothing compared to what the President of the United States is accused of in the days before the President of the United States arrives for a state visit, to which I say, why not? Starmer simply says, I can't fire the United States President, but I can fire the United Kingdom's ambassador to the United States. But then, no, I've talked myself out of that one again as well. Because, of course, this was already known. So he can't get rid of him for something that he already knew about when he gave him the job. I told you this was the maddest story in a very, very long time. I suspect you probably believed me, but if you didn't then, you will do now. It is 11:45.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 11:48. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. There's quite a lot coming up in the next hour. PMQs will be upon us shortly. If I said to you, I'm starting to feel sorry, I think I said this to you a while ago, and I think she's ridiculous and very rude. She's been quite rude about me in the past. I do seem to live a bit rent-free in all their heads. Was it Honest Bob Jenrick who mentioned me on stage at the Conservative conference? It's very weird. Just little old me. But I am feeling very sorry for Kemi, increasingly so. I'm not a sadist, right? I'm not a sadist. I mean, there are people I'm sure I would enjoy their public humiliation, but there would still come a point where I'd be like, oh, stop now, like that Simpsons meme. Stop now, he's already dead. Do you know what I mean? But Kemi Badenoch's absence of self-awareness, coupled with that absolute, what would you call it, when she says things like, I'm getting better every week and I don't do gaffes. It's becoming, it's not as much fun as I thought it would be to watch her grand unravelling. And also, some of the people sitting beside her obviously have already waved her goodbye, but don't want her to actually hit the road until the next electoral disaster has actually been chalked up and put on her watch. But we will find out. So what I'm saying is, there's a little bit of me that kind of hopes she has a good PMQs most weeks now. I kind of find myself thinking, I wonder if we've even started straining to say she has. Oh, Kemi Badenoch's had a good PMQs, hasn't she, Natasha? And Natasha will go, well, no, not really, James. You're doing that thing you do. You're too nice, James, she'll say. You've got to stop being so nice about Tories. It's such an odd look. But I am now feeling quite... What would you say to me? And just text this one to 84850 or WhatsApp it. If I said to you, what advice would you give me in order to resist the temptation of feeling sorry for Kemi Badenoch? All right? We can play that game as we prepare for PMQs. But it is to Peter Mandelson that I return your attention now, and the question of whether or not his position has been rendered untenable by the latest revelations and some repetitions about his relationship with the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Philip's in Stanmore. Philip, what would you like to say? Good
morning, James. Thank you so much for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
Okay, so I've got to word this carefully. I'm a photographer, and I think I've called in the past regarding some of the celebrities that I photographed.
I remember, yes.
Yeah, I was photographing for the Trumps, the royal family, and all manner of different people. Now, my contribution is along similar lines, and I want to make a parallel where I have witnessed Mandelson with someone else, where in that case I don't think one could cast suspicion about nefarious activity compared to his relationship that he had with Epstein. So I'm not going to mention the name of the Russian oligarch, but I photographed...
You're awful. You're awful. Not only are you awful, but you've just turned me into Dick Emery as well. Oh, you are awful. Why can't I? Okay, if I guess correctly, you won't tell me either, will you?
No, I won't.
Okay.
So to get to the point, I photographed Mandelson at a private party hosted by a well-known Russian oligarch.
With a big beard. With a great big beard and a newspaper. I got you.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Now, it's important to point out that the Russian oligarch himself has made a point of denying any connections with Putin. He's attempted to avoid the label of being an oligarch. He's very much part of the establishment here. And despite his wealth, 26-odd billion, he really can't be... Yeah, he can't be put in the same sort of bracket as some of the other Russian oligarchs who...
Okay, I understand. So he has made a ton of money in post-communist Russia, but he hasn't given big slices of it to Vladimir Putin and doesn't dance to Vladimir Putin's tune. I think I know who it is, and I'm not going to speculate, but it wasn't the bloke I was thinking of earlier with the big beard. Carry on.
Yeah, I'm not going to mention any names.
No, I know you.
Now, the point being, at the party that I was photographing, I was the only photographer. It's a private event. I was commissioned by the planner. Mandelson was clearly uncomfortable that I was there. He was sat at the table. He kept giving me the side eye. You could see that he didn't like the fact he was being photographed in the company of this person.
Are you sure? Because he's got that kind of face. I suffer from this as well. Adrian Childs wrote a wonderful article about being preternaturally grumpy even when you're in a really good mood. And Mandelson has a face that might look like he's giving you side eye even when he's trying to smile.
Possibly. I mean, when you're looking down a lens and you're studying someone closely, waiting for the right moment, you really literally sort of observe them so closely and constantly.
Yes, okay.
Now, what I'd like to say to try to sort of bring this back to answering your question, if I think it would be very unfair to sort of label Mandelson as being guilty of anything just by being in the company of that Russian gentleman.
Yes, so do I.
And also, as I discover more about that gentleman with the help of Eleanor, we discover that Russian gentleman is, contributing.
Yes.
Now,
so Eleanor knows who it is.
Oh, no, don't. Well, you
Excellent.
can have a chat.
Well, I'll get the thumb screws out after the show. That's marvellous. Or possibly during the 12 o'clock news. Anyway, and now we compare that to Epstein, I think.
Yes. Now, we know a lot more about Epstein, and he's certainly someone of very, very nefarious background, guilty of charge, and as you quite rightly pointed out to another person, there's a big difference between accepting some gifts or a free concert from someone compared to what
happened
any
here.
connection with Epstein is. And given Keir Starmer's desire to create a very squeaky clean government, we've just seen him act efficiently with Angela Rayner. That's debatable. I've listened to your previous discussions and debates about whether or not that should have happened. Really, what we don't want is a scenario where years later we discover that Mandelson was at some parties, some pictures emerge and so forth and evidence, and we say, well, why didn't we get rid of him earlier? If Keir Starmer is going to go down the road of morality, clearing out anyone that might be suspicious and having nefarious activity with someone that is clearly guilty, why didn't we act earlier? So to answer your question, I think in this case, I do like actually Mandelson. When I see him, I don't get the same sort of
Prince of Darkness vibe that some people get.
Absolutely not.
A lot of people find him very clubbable. He wouldn't have achieved what he's achieved if he wasn't, would he?
Yeah, so I'd be sad to see him go, but I think if if we are going to kind of see Starmer acting in the right way to separate himself from the history of the Tories and their activities.
But he hired it. I don't know that anything has emerged that wasn't already known, or at least suspected. So if he gets rid of him and he hired him, he ends up looking ridiculous, doesn't he?
Sure, but then again, I think Keir Starmer's probably by now accepted that it's impossible for him to not look like that on occasion,
yes,
and
true.
That should not stop him from making stern decisions. And you know, when Starmer comes to the end of it all, I think, you know, hopefully he'll look back and said,
at least I did the right thing.
He did the right thing.
At least I did the right thing. And you don't, just briefly, because PMQs is on the way, you don't see any mileage in the early callers suggesting, David it was, I think, suggesting that you can't do this because Trump's on the same hook.
Yeah, I didn't hear that because I was chatting to Eleanor, so I can't compare. But again,
well, that's what he said. I mean, you can't. I mean, it would be difficult diplomatically because Trump is on the same hook as Mandelson.
But Trump is in a whole different bracket to Mandelson when it comes to sort of power, responsibility, impact, and their sort of place in global,
yes,
you know, in the globe. I mean, you know, and again. Put it this way, I mean, Starmer can't get it right every time, and he is making mistakes. He's bound to make mistakes, but that doesn't mean that when he sees the opportunity to do something correct, he shouldn't.
Yeah, I hear you, and I think I agree with you. And you've got a touch of the Joe in Enniskillens as well, just the fact that principle has to overcome political expediency sometimes, otherwise nothing matters. Just for fans of political depravity and moral dissolution, the Boris Johnson story is still bubbling away as well, the one that we talked to Henry Dyer of The Guardian about yesterday, this huge tranche of documents, or fairly big tranche of documents that has cast many questions over his conduct since leaving Parliament, and and leaving Downing Street. He responded to these allegations by saying this story is rubbish. And when Donald Trump finally got asked about the latest Epstein developments, he responded by saying, I don't comment on something that's a dead issue. If you were going to write a little guidebook to being that kind of politician, there'd be two lovely little textbook examples for you. How do you deal with accusations that are really, really troubling and really difficult? Well, you just say that they're not real. I don't comment on something that's a dead issue. They're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. And when Boris Johnson is presented with evidence that he may have been in breach of all manner of rules about how former prime ministers should conduct themselves subsequently, he said, this story is rubbish. The PDCA has been used entirely in accordance with the rules, he said, without providing any evidence. The Guardian should change its name to Pravda, so shoot the messenger. That's the second bit of the picture. So it's a Democrat hoax, Trump's second bit. The Guardian should change its name to Pravda, but they're literally reading to you documents that have been leaked from your own office. How can you then accuse them? Anyway, should we squeeze in Carrie, or should we just check whether it's that one? Carrie, what made you pick up the phone?
Hello again.
Hello.
It's me. I don't want you to be careful talking to me about this because I am...
You are. And do you know, Carrie, you've just jogged my memory because I was going to quote one of Epstein's victims as saying, how on earth can Mandelson stay in the job? But everybody knew about his associations with Epstein, and you yourself, of course, were sexually assaulted as a child. You told me last time we spoke.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you want to add to this one then?
Those of us that have experienced this are watching. And we are going to watch how this plays out and vote accordingly in the future.
Wow.
We're watching. And it's not just the current Prime Minister, it's everyone that's around him. How are they going to be judged in the future when we look back and think, are they protecting us? Because it's not just...
Mandelson's, and I know you know this, but to clarify, he's not accused of anything except maintaining his friendship with somebody who was accused and convicted of trafficking.
They all knew. And it was okay.
I mean, I think you're allowed to have that view, and you're certainly allowed to have that an incredibly powerful observation about we are watching, but I mean, there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever to suggest that Peter Mandelson had any inkling whatsoever of what Jeffrey Epstein was getting up to. I mean, that is just the facts as they stand. But, you know, stories change, new things emerge. It seems to me unconscionable, actually, to stay friends with somebody after this has happened. I can't quite think of a precedent for that or imagine circumstances in which anybody would. But Andrew Windsor did, and it would appear that Peter Mandelson did, and that did not stop Keir Starmer from giving him the big job in the first place. Why is my inbox full of the same 5 words? Countless people sending me the same 5 words. Can you guess, A, what the words are, and B, why they've all sent me the same 5 words in response to something that popped up earlier on the programme? Natasha Clark is here to prepare us for Prime Minister's questions. Do you know why?
The 5 words? No.
Give your head a
wobble.
Correct.
Okay, what
advice would you give me if I said that I was starting to feel increasingly sorry for Kemi Badenoch every week, and everyone has been queuing up to say the same things? Give your head a wobble. Here it comes. What do you reckon then?
Do we think she's going to do better than last week?
She really got into bother last week, didn't she? Because the Rayner thing should have been, I don't know if it's true or not, but everybody thought it should have been something she could skewer him with, and she failed to skewer him.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And equally among Conservatives that I was speaking to this time last week, that said that she should have really gone a little bit harder on the Angela Rayner row. She did admit wrongdoing 15 minutes before Prime Minister's questions, so you would expect that to pop up quite prominently. I think in the end she used it on maybe one question, maybe 2.
Why do you think that is? Do we speculate on that?
We did. We sort of said, I just think it shows that she's not very nimble on her feet. She doesn't think as quickly as potentially she could and should. And actually, one of the things that we've talked about before is that the reason why lots of Conservatives wanted her to be Tory leader is because they thought that she might be very good at Prime Minister's questions. And turns out, actually, on the day, she's not as fantastic as she could be.
But she's getting better every week.
She's getting better every week. Well, I think she has
getting better all the time.
Things can only get better, as one person once sung. But she's got quite a long list of things that she could bring up this week, I think. And actually, if I were her, I might go for a scattergun approach this week of lots of different stories in the newspapers, lots of different things. Obviously, Peter Mandelson and the story you've been discussing for the last hour could again be another thing to back the government with. What did the Prime Minister know that Peter Mandelson continued his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein in the way that he's discussed today? Peter Mandelson also talking in that interview from earlier today about fearing that more things are going to come out. That's pretty embarrassing for any US ambassador to be admitting that there may be more stories that could embarrass the government. And like you've just been saying, it's ahead of Trump's state visit.
When is that exactly? I know I should know this.
Late next week.
Is it?
So, that could be potentially very embarrassing for the Prime Minister. Equally, Kemi Badenoch this week has been talking about the welfare bill. She wants the Prime Minister to be working with her on a plan to cut the welfare bill. I think she might raise this too.
I didn't quite get my head around that story. She's very, very rude about him.
But she wants to work together.
And not very creatively, sadly. I'm a big fan of creative rudeness, but she's not a very good rude person. And now I only read the headline. It said something like, Keir Starmer should work with me on welfare. So 14 years in power. And now they're trying to sort of get on to piggyback the people that have replaced. I don't know. What was that all about?
I think she's basically making a point that Labour MPs aren't going to support welfare cuts, but the Tories will. So let's work together on a plan that can actually get something through the House of Commons. Obviously, it's a big political trap because that's something that Keir Starmer is absolutely not going to do.
Oh, so she thought she was being clever.
I think she thinks she's being clever. I'm working together in the national interest with you to cut the deficit.
Bless her.
Bless. But obviously, there's some more serious things I'm sure will be discussed. Potentially, Poland is obviously a serious topic, and NATO, that might be something that she might want to raise.
We have a guest coming up on that after PMQs, actually, to talk us through the significance of this moment. And, of course, the President of Israel coming to visit is not something that she'll seek to make political capital out of, I don't think, because...
Potentially, because she obviously is opposed to that plan to recognise Palestine as a state. So she may choose to recognise it in this way. I think you're probably right. It's unlikely. She's got a lot of other things she could talk about. You'd like to think she might use the opportunity to put the boot into Rayner. Obviously, she only resigned on Friday, and she's not really had the opportunity to sort of do so with the reshuffle. And, of course, there's an interesting story in The Guardian today from Rain Newton-Smith, the head of the CBI, calling on the Chancellor to rip up the tax VAT pledge, basically saying that we need to get this money.
I think she'll use that.
That's interesting.
I think she'll probably use that.
That's interesting. She'll say, these guys lied about your taxes, etc.
I'd be surprised if that didn't get an airing. And Ed Davey, I think I should ask you more. We probably won't have time now. Keith will bark in my ear in about 6 seconds. But what might Ed Davey bring up?
Yeah, I think Israel would be a really
Trump.
easy topic of Trump and potentially Mandelson and what he knew, didn't know. Is this a proper thing for the special relationship?
He's still not going to the dinner, is he?
No, not as far as we know. Gained his political capital from that. Wonder what he'll be doing instead.
Go, go, go. Here it is.
Mr. Speaker, can I associate myself with the comments the Prime Minister made about the Duchess of Kent? She lived an exemplary life of public service and she will be very much missed. And I also agree with the Prime Minister, as should all of us in this House. We stand shoulder to shoulder with Poland and all our NATO allies against Putin's aggression. A NATO country has just had to defend itself against Russian drones. Now, more than ever, we need our ambassador to Washington fully focused on this issue and liaising closely with America. Does the Prime Minister have full confidence in Peter Mandelson?
Mr. Speaker, let me start by saying the victims of Epstein are the forefront of our minds. He was a despicable criminal who committed the most heinous crimes and destroyed the lives of so many women and girls. The ambassador has repeatedly expressed his deep regret for his association with him. He's right to do so. I have confidence in him and he's playing an important role in the UK-US relationship.
This is interesting, Mr. Speaker. He says the ambassador has expressed full regret, but the victims of the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein have called for Lord Mandelson to be sacked. And just so the House is aware, in 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was convicted of child prostitution and sex trafficking that took place between 2002 and 2005. That is the precise period which Lord Mandelson called Jeffrey Epstein his best pal. Absolutely. Was the Prime Minister aware of this intimate relationship when he appointed Lord Mandelson to be our ambassador in Washington?
Mr. Speaker, as she and the House would expect, full due process was followed during this appointment, as it is with all ambassadors. The ambassador has repeatedly expressed his deep regret. He is right to do so. He's now playing an important part in the US-UK relationship.
Kemi Badenoch. Mr. Speaker, I asked the Prime Minister if he knew. The fact that he didn't answer indicates that he probably did know. I wasn't asking a question about process. I was asking a question about his judgment. The Daily Telegraph reports today that while Lord Mandelson was business secretary, he brokered a deal with Jeffrey Epstein while he was business secretary, and that this occurred after Epstein had been convicted of child sex offences. Given this new information, does the Prime Minister really think it is tenable for our ambassador to remain in post?
Mr. Speaker, the relationship between the US and the UK is one of our foremost relationships, and I have confidence in the ambassador in the role that he is doing.
Mr. Speaker, I think it is embarrassing that the Prime Minister is still saying that he has confidence in a man who was brokering deals with convicted child sex offenders while sitting in government. That is a disgrace. This government has repeatedly refused to declare Lord Mandelson's full interests. And as part of the appointment, there will have been extensive government vetting, including details and timings of Peter Mandelson's dealings with Jeffrey Epstein. So will the Prime Minister publish all these documents, including those about his interests?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I say, full due process was gone through in relation to this appointment, as would be expected. As for the publication of documents, as she well knows, that's subject to a procedure which includes an independent element. Be subject to the usual procedure.
The Prime Minister cannot answer any questions. That is not the behaviour of someone who has full confidence. The ambassador should be in the White House talking about how we respond to an incursion into NATO airspace. Instead, he is giving interviews about himself to The Sun. This is a man who already had to be removed from cabinet twice, and now we learn that he was brokering billion-pound deals with Jeffrey Epstein while business secretary. I didn't get a proper answer. He's talking about process. This is not about process. This is about judgment. done. Just last week, I told him that he should sack his deputy prime minister. They all cheered and congratulated themselves. She was gone 2 days later. His face too is broken, and he's got a totally new front bench. So I will ask him again, will he make sure that these documents are published, and will he actually instruct Peter Mandelson to publish all his correspondence with Jeffrey Epstein?
She says the ambassador's been in the White House discussing NATO. He is, as we all are, with a number of international calls this morning and on Ukraine, as well as the attack in Doha yesterday. Mr. Speaker, I see she's finally catching up with the questions that she should have asked last week about the Deputy Prime Minister. In the meantime, Mr. Speaker, we have been opened up a new schools-based nursery. On Monday, we had the Defence Industrial Strategy. On Tuesday, we published NHS league tables to push up standards. We reopened Doncaster and Sheffield Airport yesterday. And today, we've set out how we're repairing the concrete in our hospitals.
Kemi, Badenoch. A load of waffle and whataboutery, Mr. Speaker. Interested right now is their pointless deputy leadership election while the country is out there suffering from an economic crisis. The Prime Minister has an ambassador mired in scandal, not focusing on NATO. He lost his deputy Prime Minister just last week for evading taxes. He's got a new Home Secretary, a new Foreign Secretary just learning the ropes, not able to help with this issue. We have strikes crippling our capital city and damaging our economy. He could use minimum service legislation, which we introduced to make the lives of the people out there better, but he won't because he does not have the backbone to face down the unions. The unions are running this government. All the deputy leadership candidates are chasing after them. And while with this government, it is more strikes, more scandal, more chaos. And the link, Mr. Speaker, isn't the link between all of this his bad decisions, his bad judgment, and his total weakness.
Mr. Speaker, our Deputy Leader contest started this week and ends on the 25th of October. Their leadership contest has been going on for months and will continue for a very long time. And all this noise from the arsonists whilst we're putting out the fires that they left behind. Interest rates and waiting lists, Mr. Speaker, down. Wages, investment and deportations up. And now we're stepping up defence spending, creating new jobs, driving up standards in our NHS and rebuilding our crumbling schools and hospitals. This is a government of patriots fighting for working people.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This Labour government is getting our NHS back on its feet with 20,000 fewer patients on waiting lists at my local trust since the election. But there is still more to do, including making it easier to see a GP. So can the Prime Minister set out how this government will give my constituents in East Worthing and Shoreham access to the healthcare that they deserve?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased we've made progress on the NHS. We promised 2 million extra appointments in the first year of a Labour government. We've delivered not 2, not 3, but over 4 million extra appointments, with 2,000 extra GPs and clearing up the dangerous rack in our hospitals. The National League tables, Mr. Speaker, that we published this week will make sure that investment goes where it's needed most, and our 10-year health plan will see neighbourhood health centres in every community to treat patients closer to home. There's more to do, but we've made a lot of progress.
Sir Ed David, Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in sending our condolences to His Majesty and the royal family on the death of the Duchess of Kent? And can I echo the Prime Minister's condemnation of Netanyahu's attacks on Qatar? These are not the actions of a leader truly focused on getting hostages home. And I hope the Prime Minister will say that directly to President Herzog later today. On Suicide Prevention Day, Mr. Speaker, can I thank all working to prevent suicides, from professionals to charities like the Samaritans. Mr. Speaker, when I talk to parents of disabled children, there's one complaint about government that comes up time and again. All the hoops they must jump through, from EXCPs to the DWP to HMRC. Caring is exhausting enough without all the forms and rules that show no understanding of the realities of life as a carer. It's something Emily and I know well. It's something that our former Deputy Prime Minister brought attention to last week. So will the Prime Minister work with carers across this House to overhaul systems for family carers so government works much better for people looking after their loved ones?
Well, I do agree with him. There are too many hurdles and too many hoops that have to be gone through, and that's why we're simplifying the system, and we will, of course, work across the House with all those who want to achieve that outcome. Can I also just thank those dealing with suicide prevention? I think probably everybody in this House knows someone who has taken their life, and it touches all of us, and we must do everything we can together to prevent suicide.
Sir Ed Davey.
Moving on, Mr. Speaker, as the Leader of the Opposition said, Lord Mandelson has admitted to continuing his relationship long after Epstein was convicted, and that there are more embarrassing details we don't yet know. Mr. Speaker, people will be surprised by the Prime Minister giving Ambassador Mandelson such strong support today. So can he tell the House, has the Prime Minister asked the Ambassador what other compromising material the Trump administration might have on him as he leads Britain's negotiations with the White House?
Very quickly. Well, Mr. Speaker, as I've made clear to the House, a full due process was gone through when the appointment was made.
George Newbury.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent Connor Edwards lives with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
And we're out. 16 minutes after 12. That was extraordinary. It was almost as if someone was listening. That was, for my... Well, are you familiar with the Curse of O'Brien, Natasha?
No, do tell me.
Curse of O'Brien involves me praising a politician, usually from the Conservative side of the House, and them subsequently proving that they didn't deserve my admiration at all. That was the opposite.
The opposite.
The precise opposite. That was by a country mile. Kemi Badenoch's best performance at PMQs, which is exactly what I was wishing for just 20 short minutes ago, from which there is a lesson to be gleaned, although I'm not quite sure what that lesson is.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 19 minutes after 12, so I don't think there can be any doubt that Kemi Badenoch just gave Keir Starmer something of a spanking over his continuing loyalty to Peter Mandelson, but it was rather more than that. It wasn't just that she had all the ducks in a row. She dispatched them very adroitly, Natasha. It was, I would say, and we do this together every week, by some distance, her best performance yet. Why?
Because she acted in a way, and she went at a forensic line of questioning that she should have done last week with Angela Rayner, and she was unable to think nimbly enough on her feet to do that then, and clearly she was under such pressure from her Tory backbenchers. They wanted her to do well. They wanted her to poke at this hole, I think, and I think she delivered a very forensic and probing line of questioning. That they sounded sensible questions. Keir Starmer was robotic in his answers. He gave full support, and I just don't think it was a fantastic answer from Keir Starmer.
No, he looked shady. He looked shifty, and she looked very strong. I don't know that I'd agree with about nimbleness or fleet of foot. I think what she got right.
She had 4 hours this time to watch the interview,
and she had every line written down. I mean, that was she. I think she was reading. I was listening, not watching.
They all felt very scripted questions.
Yeah, but that's a good thing to do sometimes. If you're going to stick with the same subject, which is what you said she should have done last week, then you can do that. You can construct your questions in such a way that creates a pincer movement. So you take the answer or the failure to answer the last one, and then
add another one,
go in with the old 1-2 as a boxing coach. With
exactly. So she sort of started off, saying, "Do you have full confidence in him?" He said yes. That was basically the only question he was really able to answer. Went on to sort of ask how much he was aware of the relationship, which I think is probably going to go to the heart of where this criticism of Peter Mandelson will come in the next few days. How much did the Prime Minister know about his links to Epstein? And if so, can you really say that the full proper process of vetting was followed in all ways? And like you've been discussing, we don't have any proof that there was anything improper that went on. But, as Kemi Badenoch just mentioned, they were friends with him. He was talking about, when he made those comments about being best pals with him, was during the time when he was abusing people and later convicted of doing so. how much can you really be aware of somebody who you will call your best pal is doing so? And is it really fair to say that?
A bit of a, it's quite a claim, isn't it? And crucially, again, as we were contemplating in the last hour, the maintaining of contacts, although this isn't a new revelation, the maintaining of contacts after the imprisonment is an extraordinarily ill-advised.
Absolutely.
For this type of crime. If it was a financial crime, you could perhaps argue loyalty, or if it was a victimless crime, if such a thing exists, you could perhaps argue loyalty. I will stand by my friends through thick and thin, but not this type of crime.
Exactly. After conviction and after, knowing the details of which we did, it is embarrassing for the government. It's embarrassing for Keir Starmer to have to answer these questions. But I thought that his answers weren't fantastic, actually, and I wonder.
They were poor. They were down.
It felt maybe that he hadn't prepared quite as many answers on that as he could have done.
Or it felt like he's not actually four square behind Mandelson.
Potentially, although why would he say he's got full confidence in him and he's doing an important role?
He either says that or he's gone already. If he's still there, he's got full confidence.
But in that case, you would expect him to have a few more lines prepared in terms of the details of that. What I knew, Mandelson said in that interview earlier today that he hadn't spoken to Starmer since these revelations have come out over the last 48 hours or so, which does...
Not good.
It's not a good look. But actually, I thought what she did with linking it to Keir Starmer's judgment and linking it to last week with Angela Rayner was quite good. I thought it was very weird that Keir Starmer then mentioned, these are the questions you should have asked me last week. That felt like an odd, why mention? He was the one that mentioned Angela Rayner.
I know where you're coming from, but and that didn't sound off the cuff either. It sounded as if something he'd got that prepared in advance, because he knows how much trouble she got into with her own members, so he's just reminding them how rubbish she was last week. But here's a failure to be fleet of foot. That only works if she's being a bit rubbish again this week. If she's actually playing a blinder this week and you say, you were rubbish last week, you end up sounding a bit pathetic.
Yeah, and just a word about sort of the optics in the chamber, which we obviously can't hear, but you can pick up a little on. Didn't feel like there was really much noise at all until the very end, obviously, and you hear the cheers from the Tory benches and the more. I don't think I can remember when any Tory benches calling for more from Kemi Badenoch.
That was quite cathartic for them. You could tell it wasn't just today they were cheering.
They really needed a win.
I think there was a release of pent-up tension that they were going to... that they were going to fill their boots with. There's a weird bit here, though, isn't there? Because, Starmer has, some would say, sucked up to Trump. Others would say very cleverly and diplomatically kept him sweet. Badenoch has been very forthcoming in her praise for him. And all of this despite him essentially being on the hook for all of the things, or almost all of the things that Mandelson is accused of, and quite possibly more. But neither of them can say it. I was surprised Ed Davey didn't, but neither of them, neither Starmer can't defend or at least distract from Mandelson by saying, what about Trump, for obvious reasons. And Badenoch has put herself in a position where she can't do that either. And
they danced around that a little bit, didn't they? And they sort of used Poland and what's been happening overnight as a sort of excuse to sort of talk about the serious issues that we have to discuss with America. But you're right, they danced around the idea of Donald Trump, they danced around the idea of the state visit and about what Kemi Badenoch has heaped praise on him in the past. Knowing now what we know about those links to and like you say, again, this is not new. Everybody has known these links for some time, and it does sort of call into question Keir's judgment in this. Equally, the reason that Peter Mandelson was appointed was because of his extensive links to the Trump campaign and the government there, because that was something that was seen at the time that Keir Starmer's government did not have those relationships that were solidly in place. So there was a reason for his appointment, and I don't think anybody will argue that it's not a good thing to have people who have very good links to the current administration. So that's why he's in the job in the first place.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I'm not very good at reading the runes on these sort of developments and when a story's going to go away and when it's going to grow. Although I don't
think so. I think you nailed it with Angela Rayner last week.
You're very kind. I may have got it wrong in the very first instance, but I quickly made amends.
You quickly decided, actually, she's got to go. She's on the way out.
For the reasons that she eventually went for. I can't see this one as clearly because unless something new emerges that he can claim he didn't know, it's going to be very hard to get rid of him for things that he either did know or could easily have found out before making the original appointment.
Yeah, and I think if you're number 10 today, you'll be wanting to see all of those documents that were part of Peter Mandelson's vetting, right? You want to be seeing everything. But Peter Mandelson admitting in that interview that he thinks that more potential revelations will come out. He said he doesn't believe he's named in the Epstein files at all. But this story is completely dominating American politics in many ways and has been for weeks. And
despite Donald Trump's best efforts to make it go away and claim that it's what they sometimes call in the States a nothing burger.
Yeah, but Kemi did well on some of these questions. We both, I think, shared a view that maybe at the end she lost it a little. She lost the sort of authority that she'd maybe had at the start.
Got a bit too excited.
Got a bit too excited.
How well she was doing, I think.
Yeah, and I think she got a bit angry. She started talking a bit quicker. It got a bit more chaotic towards the end there. But she, like I say, I think she had some good lines there. I don't think Keir Starmer had enough. Enough comebacks and enough evidence. If I were number 10 Downing Street, I would have dug out a lot of positive things to say about Peter Mandelson if I was going to go in for a full-throated defence of him, not just answering a robotic. The full process was, done at all times sort of answer from him.
I wonder if they just got it wrong. I wonder if they just were not expecting 4 or 5 questions on Mandelson, which would be a mistake. I think they should at least have spotted the possibility, but it did look at 2 things I would take away from that, both of which could be completely 3, because again, to somewhat labour the point, she had a blinder. 80% of what she did there was the best she's ever been.
But you can't, as number 10, just assume that Kemi Badenoch isn't going to be very good. You have to be prepared.
So the 2 other things would be, number 1, if I was Peter Mandelson listening to that, I'd be worried.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
And number 2 or 3, depending on when you started counting, they were expecting her to jump around more, because she always does.
Yeah, and to be fair, actually, I thought there was a lot of things she could have gone on. She could have gone on the tax stuff. She could have gone on the welfare tax. She could have gone on Mandelson. She could have gone on Poland. There's lots of things. Rayner, of course. And she did weave in Rayner a little bit, didn't she? But she could have gone on a lot of topics today. And it depends. Sometimes you can really, really easily, if you've got a theme to draw this whole thing around, you can really easily go on lots of different topics if you've got one common theme to tie them all together. And I thought that's what she might do. But she's not tended to be very good at that. And when she has done that kind of tactic in the past, it hasn't worked. Budget in the economy, we know that she's regularly using this. So Keir Starmer, in a way, is more prepared for those answers than he ever was before. He's now got a really, really good crib sheet. He's not been asked about this before. This is a new topic. Yeah. And actually, you know what, the fact that she'd prepared, she's got enough answers, she's got enough questions. It definitely left Keir Starmer on the back foot today, didn't it?
It did, yes, it did. And I would say indubitably, and my inbox would support that conclusion, although someone described it as scoring an open goal when your team is still being relegated. So
she didn't manage to score an open goal.
She missed an open goal last week, so that's a win.
Exactly. So
by any measure.
1 out of 2.
Coming up in the next half an hour of the programme, we get some expert analysis of the incursions into Polish airspace of Russian drones and the warning from the Polish Prime Minister. This is the closest this country has been to war since 1945. Our colleague Andy Hughes has an extraordinary exclusive that you will have heard some of already, involving young people being essentially groomed for terrorism. And as things stand, although he's obviously a very busy man this morning, we will be speaking to the head of the RMT, Eddie Dempsey, about the ongoing tube dispute in London. And part of the reason why I wanted to do that was because in the course of yesterday's conversations, tube drivers contributing to this programme made it clear that 99% of the media coverage of this dispute has been, at the very least, disingenuous and quite possibly deeply dishonest. So I thought we'd do a little bit to set that record straight. First, though, Tim Humphrey has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 33 minutes after 12 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I mentioned to you at the top of the show today that there are days when you feel almost incapable of keeping up with all of the news. So as we were processing the Peter Mandelson story that just dominated PMQs, as you heard, and of course the events overnight in Qatar, which seem to have destroyed pretty much any hope of a negotiated ceasefire or a negotiated hostage release, or indeed Israel's claims to be committed to either. And then, as if that weren't enough to wrestle with, we learn about Russia's reported violation of Poland's airspace, with the NATO Secretary-General describing it as reckless behaviour, and Donald Tusk, as you heard, the Polish Prime Minister, suggesting that his country, is the closest it's been to war since World War II. Anthony King is a professor of war studies at the University of Exeter and joins me now. I think Russia are currently claiming that the drones were of Ukrainian origin, which I suppose is possible, Anthony, but surely unlikely.
Yes, and I agree. And more news has happened in the last 24 hours than in a decade in previous times, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. For instance, the Ukrainians have mounted many drone attacks on Russia and Russian airspace since the start of the war. They also committed certain acts of sabotage on the Nord Stream pipeline back in 2022. But I think it's just Russian misinformation. But it's interesting misinformation, because what it suggests, I mean, there's been various interpretations to this incursion into Russian airspace, and one of it is it was strategically deliberate to provoke NATO. The fact that they've then made this accusation that it's Ukrainian suggests to me, which was my inference anyway, that it was a mistake. The Russians have been mounting an increasing strategic bombardment on Ukrainian cities over the last few months. Over 200 people were killed in July alone. And I suspect I infer that this is a widening of that campaign, but one where somewhere down the track, and there's quite a lot of incompetence in the Russian military, that there's been a mistake in terms of the programming of these drones or the control of this drone wave. I mean, it makes no material difference to the outcome that they've been striking Ukraine and that they have made incursions into Polish airspace. But I think it's Russian, and I think it's Russians pushing the envelope rather than deliberately provoking NATO.
And I mean, it doesn't change the narrative of escalation, even if this specific part of the process turns out to be a mistake. It's clear that in recent days, as the European Union Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said, Russia is escalating now, not ending. The biggest, I think, aerial attack on Ukraine since the war began just 3 days ago.
Yeah. Absolutely. And indeed, one could, I think there's a strategic reason. So to open up a sort of northern flank of attack from Belarus means that they can strike more Ukrainian cities. They're putting more pressure on Ukrainian air defense. Ukrainian air defense has been good, but most of the attacks have come from the east. So presumably the Russians are then thinking, well, if we come from the north or even from the east simultaneously, we'll put additional pressure and our strikes are likely to be more effective. And this has absolutely been the strategy since we look like we might be approaching some kind of ceasefire or peace deal. Of course, the Russians want to put themselves in the absolute prime position they can. And the two prongs of attack have been ground attacks in the Donbass around Pokrovsk and increased air attacks. And absolutely, this attack overnight is part of that dual strategy, and especially that increased strategic air bombardment onto Ukrainian cities. Absolutely part of that.
What footing? I was struck by the defence minister, the Polish defence minister, thanking NATO Air Command and Royal Netherlands Air and Space Force for supporting their action with F-35 fighter jets. What footing is Poland on in this space?
Well, NATO is on a heightened footing. And in terms of air defence, NATO is always on a sort of surveillance, monitoring of its airspace at all times. I don't think it's been at heightened footing in terms of having squadrons in the air at all times. But NATO, in terms of air surveillance, is on 24-hour watch and always has been. And of course, because it's NATO, air squadrons will be cut from other countries, and that will explain why in this particular case it's Danish F-16s that were useful. Now after this attack, I have no doubt that NATO will have to, especially on those eastern flank countries, NATO will have to increase its air surveillance and will want to demonstrate that increased air surveillance, even though, as I say, I don't think it was Russia's intention to provoke and escalate NATO. I mean, not out of moral reasons, I think pure instrumental strategic reasons, Putin gains nothing from that. And as I say, as we start the conversation, the subsequent accusations of Ukraine suggest that, although, of course, that's also a bit of Russian misinformation, I think.
So regardless of how it happened, the fact that this is the first time NATO planes have engaged potential threats in Allied airspace is a game changer.
Yes. I mean, I might not say a game changer, because I think the game changer, of course, was the original invasion, 22nd of February 2022. What it brings home is that the military threat is there, and the triggers are also a little bit closer than we might think. And European leaders, NATO leaders need to be very well aware of that, and to actually have deterrence plans, but also serious plans for these potential incursions to make sure they don't escalate. I mean, that would be, most people support Ukraine completely. That's the official line, and certainly I would.
Yes.
But we don't want an escalation, a horizontal escalation into a wider European conflict.
Let's pretend you're wrong, and it was deliberate. What conversation would we be having now?
Well, to be honest, it would be exactly the same. So let's say it was deliberate. So let's say the Russians thought, right, we're going to go into Polish airspace because we want to see what the political and military reaction is. Well, on both levels, what they've received is essentially, as far as the evidence is, all of the drones that went into the Polish airspace were destroyed. So, and there is complete political unity. So, in fact, even if the intention was entirely what the negative interpretation, the most sort of rational interpretation, the most extreme interpretation of Putin, the reaction would be completely the same. Militarily, destruction and protection of airspace; politically, complete unity. And so, in a sense, it makes no difference. Now, in terms of strategic, what is the difference? It shows this. Putin won't be brought to the peace table by negotiations. I mean, it's an insult to the whole Anchorage process that he's killed dozens of people since that process, that he's then mounted this strike, which either deliberately or accidentally has gone through Polish airspace and they don't care. He damaged the British Council and the EU delegate office in Kyiv last month.
Yeah.
There is only one way to some kind of peace deal in Ukraine, and that, unfortunately, is through military power. And if not the defeat, then the demonstration that Ukraine cannot prevail militarily. So that, for me, is the strategic lesson from this incursion.
And we will never know for sure, will we? I mean, you can establish whether or not they're Ukrainian drones or Russian drones by collecting the debris, presumably, but we'll never know for sure, because even if Russia tell us one story, we won't be able to...
We might know in 50 years' time,
right,
when the archive is released. So some very interesting archives are being released from the 1950s, 1960s. We will, well, anyone who's over a certain age will not be around to see that, but we won't know comprehensively because Putin will never release it. So we have to live in this odd netherworld that is Russian misinformation.
So finally then, Anthony, what are you looking out for now? What are you sort of watching
Well, what
for?
I would hope for, I mean, let me say what I'd hope for. What I'd hope for is a change of position in terms of Trump. That is the key. That administration is the key agent. And for me, the only path forward is one of complete support of Ukraine and an increase of military support to inflict that battlefield defeat, or at least battlefield demonstration on Ukraine that Russia can't proceed any further. And that, to me, it's a regrettable thing to say, but that's the only route to me to some kind of ceasefire, some kind of peace deal, however unsatisfactory it's going to be for the Ukrainians, frankly.
Professor Anthony King from the University of Exeter, where he is, and that's why you have professors of war studies, so that 50 years from now there'll be someone to sift through the intelligence or the revelations as and when they are released. Many thanks for your time. As always, you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. The time now is just coming up to 12:44.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12:46. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Andy Hughes with another exclusive from LBC's crime correspondent imminently, and then hopefully before close of play today, or before Sheila time, we will be speaking to the head of the RMT. Just to, I mean, if we have time to do more, that would be good, but if we don't, to nail down precisely what the current industrial action here in London is about and who is actually on strike, because reading some of the coverage yesterday, and to my shame, taking it in good faith. Imagine thinking that a Daily Mail columnist might have known what he was actually talking about. If you think this strike is all about tube drivers, who are already on what some people earning hundreds of thousands of pounds a year in the media think is a very generous salary, then it may be that you've got your facts, or we have all got our facts a little bit wrong. But it's a rather different story that Andy has been looking into. What have you found?
That's right, James. So 43 children have been arrested for terror offences, including plotting mass shootings and bombings of mosques, synagogues, music festivals all across Britain, and that is the highest number on record. We're now at a situation where 1 in 5 of all terror arrests last year were for children, and the youngest arrested for planning an attack was just 11 years old. So I spoke to an undercover officer in counter-terrorism policing about this. He can't be identified because of the work he does, of course, but he told me that these children are all being radicalised on popular and easily accessible social media sites.
The content is absolutely vile.
Are we talking bomb manuals? Are we talking planning terror attacks? What we're talking?
If you name it and you'll see it. There are sadistically horrible people out there. Very few of the actual individuals that were in the centre, the nexus that were driving the threat, were actually carrying out any offences themselves. What they actually prefer is to encourage other people, give other people the resources, poke other individuals, exacerbate their grievances, and encourage those to go out and carry out an attack.
So the majority of these arrests are for extreme right-wing terrorism, which is a trend we've seen amongst young people in the past few years. And there's also been a rise in plots inspired by Islamist extremism in the past year. How does it work? Well, hate preachers are grooming young people on social media and supply them with terror handbooks. These include manuals of how to make bombs and build 3D printed guns. So I asked the officer why children are increasingly being targeted as proxies for terror attacks.
We've got a huge issue where primarily young boys feel like they're under attack. There is that male toxicity thing that's sort of pumped through the media. And so a lot of these youngsters will seek to try and find answers to some of those. And there's not many people talking about that in the mainstream. So that's where our extremists will exploit those.
What sort of stuff have you seen, Andy? What sort of material have you seen being shared?
Yeah, well, they showed me several clips, and it's really interesting, the language that they use. It's kind of grooming 101. It's grooming that's used all over the place. And they use language like, you can do more, we will teach you, you can be someone, you can make a difference. All you have to do is join our chat. I've also seen lots of propaganda videos of Hitler and burning of Israeli flags and the Second World War. But I'm increasingly told that these extremists are using current divisive issues such as small boat crossings and the asylum hotels to stoke hatred. And they're using that to draw them in and then radicalise them further and then say, here's how to do it, off you go.
I mean, it is a tricky one, isn't it, for the police to properly surveil, because you can call for these hotels to be set fire to and end up being cheered onto the stage at the Reform UK conference at the weekend. So how do they decide what the threshold is for... And I know that woman I'm referring to is a criminal, is a convicted criminal who was in prison for her vile crimes. But how do you know that a kid isn't just sort of flirting with extremism and they make a call on someone will be arrested for terror offences, which could stay on your record for a very long time? They've got that tightrope to walk between genuine intent, haven't they?
Yeah. Well, they've got experts in this area who are completely surveilling the web and these social media sites, and if they see or get any intelligence that these kids are dabbling in this, they get nicked. And then it's only then that they actually have a treasure trove of material. So it's not until the arrest that they actually know what these kids are planning.
And finally, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that some of the platforms where this grooming and targeting is taking place are not exactly bending over backwards to ensure that it gets shut down immediately.
Well, they're saying they do, but that's not what counter-terror police are telling me. Right. They say that they are spotting thousands and thousands of material every single month, and that's only the tip of the iceberg.
Andy Hughes, thank you. You're cracking some amazing stories. It's a pleasure to have you on the team. It really is. And long may it continue. 12:52 is the time. I don't expect my next guest, Eddie Dempsey, the General Secretary of the RMT, to be kept awake in his bed tonight by the difficulties that I had getting to and from the Times Literary Supplement summer party last night. But it was my first real taste, because I come to work usually by overground rather than underground, of the impact of the current industrial action on the Tube, on the London Underground. But something emerged on yesterday's show that I thought Eddie would be the best person to clarify. And it's the simple question of who is on strike and why. Because everywhere I turn, Eddie Dempsey, I'm reading about already lavishly rewarded tube drivers being the driving force behind the latest industrial action. One of your members, Dave, was at great pains to tell us yesterday that that isn't the case at all.
Yeah, that's right. And thanks for having me on, James.
Welcome.
We've got members out on strike right across the entirety of London Underground, which includes people who work in the stations, people who maintain the fleet, people who work in the engineering and control sections, as well as drivers and everybody else. We've also got members out on strike in the Docklands Light Railway, and we've also got members out on strike in the outsourced cleaning contract associated with Docklands Light Railway. But in London Underground, where a lot of the focus is, there's been a lot of work done to try to belittle the negotiating hand of our union around the reduced working week. And it's not us just looking for a shorter working week for the sake of it. We commissioned an independent piece of research with the University of Greenwich last year to look at the specific impact of shift working on our members, including in London Underground. We know the health impacts. We've got clear recommendations about how that could be reduced. It's an issue our members have been asking us to pursue for years. And part of that has got to be to reduce the working week to allow people quality rest away from the job. And that's in the interest of Londoners, because you don't want people fatigued, coming down sick at work. We need people who are in the right place, you know, in the right frame of mind, able to deliver London Underground.
What sort of things are we talking about? I mean, everyone understands what getting sick means, but how exactly does a shorter working week, 3 hours off the total amount of hours worked, improve in measurable terms both the health and performance of your members?
So at the moment, we've got people working shift patterns where you do 7 days in a row, 4 days off, then you're back on for 7 days, off for 2, then back on for another 7. So you could be working out of 16 days, you only get 2 days rest. Your shifts are moving around in terms of your start time. There's a lot of night work. Obviously, it's a 24/7 job. We work 364 days a year. This has a really detrimental impact on people's health. It leads to cardiovascular problems, proven problems with, in some cases, it can lead to all kinds of complications. And in general, heavy shift work of this type, where it's moving around, will shorten your working life, shorten your life, in fact, by 10 years. So we want our people to be able to reach retirement in good shape. This has been a demand of our members for a number of years, and we've been talking to London Underground and other employers since 2018. And what we want them to do is make some progress towards us on that. In Docklands Light Railway, we've got different issues. Our members are concerned about job security. But the overall picture is that we're seeing a different approach to transport in London than we are nationally, and we're wondering what's going on. And to be blunt with it, I think the permanent bureaucracy in TfL, the commissioners, I think they're running the show. I don't think Sadiq Khan wants to be in this place. I think he wants to do different things in London, and I think he's being held back by the commissioners and permanent management and TfL.
Well, he would say that there are no exceptional circumstances this time round that would explain or justify an intervention such as he's made before. Some would say that he kind of, having found a few million quid to deal with you last time round, it's that old line about once you pay a blackmailer once, they'll keep coming back for more. How would you respond to that suggestion?
Well, look, what we're seeing in London is outsourcing of the Elizabeth line, outsourcing of London Overground, outsourcing of all of our cleaner members, when we're told we were going to get the biggest wave of insourcing in a generation. He's told me personally he wants to see insourcing, but we're seeing a polar opposite. So that makes me question.
So you think he's washed his hands? You think he's washed his hands of TfL, let alone the RMT?
Well, I wonder how much he's in charge. I mean, look.
Well, I'll find out.
Here's the thing.
Go on.
Politicians come out with the old cliche, get round the table. We always negotiate with everyone, James. At the end of the day, Sadiq has got my phone number. He's the chairman of TfL. Don't tell me to get round to the table on social media. Invite us to a meeting. We will turn up and do the best we can to find a resolution for everyone.
Because, to be clear, what you're calling for today and throughout this industrial dispute is a negotiating position. It's the beginning of a conversation. It's not do exactly...
That's right. We don't want a cliff edge. There's a big surplus there we've helped to deliver. We're running the tube with 2,000 less people than we were a few years ago. It's a high-stress environment. We've got people working on their own.
They dispute that. How can we pin that down? TfL have rejected outright your claim that there are 2,000 fewer TfL staff now than there were pre-pandemic. How do I find out who's right?
I'm happy to send you the information. We went through the Fit for Future Stations reorganisation with London Underground a few years ago. We've got 2,000 less people delivering the tube than we had then.
Well, get that across to me, and I'll raise it with the man next time he's in this studio. In the meantime, what do you say to commuters who are having their lives turned upside down by your union's actions?
Honestly, we take no pleasure in this. I'm a Londoner too. All the people I know are disrupted. I know how painful it is. We would much rather find a negotiated settlement. That's what we do. We're always prepared to negotiate. We're always prepared to make a deal. But we have got to fight for our members. That's what they pay us our dues for. And we don't apologise for doing that. We want to look after our people. We think all workers should have a square deal in Britain.
And if we get to Friday without any resolution or without any sign of reopening of negotiation, you'll be out again soon, will you?
We will make the offer to try and sit down and talk. If we don't get any decent response out of anybody, we will have to consider our position and consider further industrial action, potentially including the Elizabeth line after the announcement of closure of ticket offices there.
And that's another document that you've seen about Crossrail and the Elizabeth line potentially having their ticket offices closed.
Again, which is at odds of Labour policy, so we don't really understand why this is happening.
Eddie Dempsey, many thanks for clarifying some of the stuff that we were confused about yesterday, and indeed going further, particularly questions for the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. Quick correction from me, it was of course a member of ASLEF that rang in to clarify that it wasn't the majority of drivers that were actually on strike, despite the fact that right-wing media has insisted throughout that this is a tube drivers' strike. Eddie Dempsey's membership made up of considerably more than that. It's coming up to 1 o'clock. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player and the LBC app, where you can stay up to date on all the top stories and opinions. You can put your news categories in the order you want. You can pause, rewind live radio, listen to a range of podcasts, and download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Tom Swarbrick will be with you at 4. But now, on LBC, it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.